Ah, sitting at his desk, the strongest shinobi of his generation, Naruto Uzumaki, sighed. Ruling the hidden village is difficult. Why did I want to become Hokage? The bandage accidentally slipped off his left eye, and it became possible to see that his left eye was very strange. It was completely purple, with a pattern similar to ripples on water, and also 6 tomo. Naruto chuckled, adjusting his eye patch and said, why does it keep falling off? While working on the paperwork, Naruto glanced at one of the photo frames that stood behind his desk. It depicted Naruto with his family. With his wife, Hinata Uzumaki, who was holding 2 small babies, newly born twins, in her arms. Aya and Menami. 3 more children were also visible. These were Naruto's eldest children. Little Himawari, his first daughter, who stood to the left of Hinata, and, hugging Naruto's legs, Boruto and Sasuke. Sasuke. Just thinking about his son, Naruto's thoughts recalled his old friend, after whom he named his second son. If only Naruto's gaze became sad for a moment and he looked at the second frame, where the young team number 7 was depicted. For a few seconds his gaze remained just as sad, but in an instant the sadness disappeared from his eyes and, in a cheerful voice, he said, nothing can be changed anymore. The past has already happened. So stop moping, Naruto. Are you Hokage or an inexperienced genin? Having finished his monologue, Naruto continued his work with the documents. Silence fell in the office and only the sound of paper being turned over broke it. Knock knock knock. A quiet knock distracted Naruto from reading important papers. Come in, Naruto said loudly so that he could be heard. The door opened and a girl came out with a tray in her hands. It was Hinata Uzumaki, Naruto's wife. She was dressed in a white kimono with sunflowers, and her hair was gathered in a bun and secured with a hairpin. On the tray she came in with, there was a teapot and 1 cup. Hinata, Naruto said kindly, did something happen? No, Naruto, Hinata answered warmly, approaching Naruto, I brought you some tea. Hinata-chan. Naruto hugged and kissed Hinata as Hinata placed the tray on the table. Maybe, Naruto began, having finished kissing Hinata, you'll stay a little longer. I can't, Hinata said, embarrassed, covering her face with the sleeve of her kimono, pouring tea into a cup with her other hand. I need to go with the children to my father, he invited us. Naruto sighed sadly. I'm sorry I can't go with you. Don't apologize, Naruto. Children understand everything. You are the Hokage and you don't have a free minute. Hinata said, leaving. But I still feel guilty. Naruto sighed when Hinata closed the door behind her. Naruto. A voice suddenly sounded in Naruto's head. Tell me, do you really not see anything? What are you talking about, Kurama? Explain. Naruto mentally asked Kurama, taking the cup of drink that his wife had put before him. It's nothing, Naruto, it's nothing. Well, never mind, Naruto thought carefree, taking a sip from the cup. Delicious. I'll have to find out what this tea is made of someday. Oh, Hinata, it's good to see you. Hanabi, the second daughter of the clan head, greeted her relatives loudly at the entrance to the Hyuga clan quarter. Wow, and you have kids with you. Auntie, Hinata's youngest daughters, Aya and Menami, ran and hugged Hanabi. Hello, Auntie. Himawari waved her hand. Hello, Auntie, Boruto said with a wide smile, looking enviously at the little sisters who were hugging Hanabi. The Hokage's second son, Sasuke Uzumaki, chuckled, crossing his arms over his chest. Like little children. Oh, Hanabi smiled cheerfully, stopping hugging her little nieces and approaching Sasuke, someone's jealous. Well, let me hug you too. After saying the last words, she quickly approached Sasuke and hugged him. Sasuke blushed and tried to resist, but eventually accepted his defeat and hugged her back. Hey, that's not fair. You did that on purpose. Boruto was indignant. Well, don't be offended. I'll hug you too. Having said these words, she peeled herself away from Sasuke and hugged Boruto, and quietly added, who would have thought that Sasuke is a tsundere? I'm not a tsundere, Sasuke shouted, blushing again. I'm just serious. Fa ha, the entire Uzumaki family laughed. Don't be offended, Sasuke, Hinata said with a smile, stroking Sasuke's head. You're just so cute when you're pouting. Mom. And again Sasuke was made to blush. It seemed there was nowhere else to blush, but Sasuke proved that he could look like the reddest tomato. Hanabi laughed cheerfully. Well, kids, shall we go? Yes. The children answered her cheerfully. Hinata is there. I know, sister. Hinata answered with a smile. Children, go without me for now. I want to meet your grandfather. Fine. Hanabi walked with the children in the opposite direction from Hinata. After walking about 10 steps, Hanabi turned around and looked at her sister as she left. She remembered her sister's warm smile, how she communicated with the children, but at the same time, she saw cold eyes in which it was impossible to discern emotions, her sister's eyes. Top top top. Hinata Uzumaki's footsteps sounded quietly in the half-empty corridor. She walked measuredly, stepping quietly. All the clan members passing by her bowed respectfully, and she bowed her head slightly. A few minutes later, she came to a nondescript door. Hinata knocked on it. A few seconds later, permission to enter was heard from behind the door. Hinata opened it. A man with brown hair, graying in places, was sitting on a pillow in the room. He was dressed in a loose kimono with a brown haori. It was Hiyashi Hyuga, the current head of the clan and Hinata's father. You took a long time. Hiyashi began to speak in a cold voice. Hinata. Sorry, father, Hinata said quietly, sitting down on the pillow that lay opposite Hiyashi. Before coming to you, I went to see the Hokage. And how? Hiyashi asked with interest. Everything is going well. The Hokage is madly in love with me. He doesn't suspect anything. Okay, Hiyashi said, drinking his tea with pleasure. Have the side effects of Chisoku appeared? He's getting a little worse every day, but he thinks it's from overexertion. Okay, Hiyashi added after thinking for a moment. Reduce the concentration of the poison. It won't be good if he dies so soon. We still need Uzumaki children. 5 aren't enough. Work harder. And I hope the next ones will also have the Byakugan, like Himawari and Menami. Daughter. As you wish, father. You can go, Hiyashi said, waving his hand. Don't keep our little Uzumaki waiting. Bye, father, Hinata said, standing up and walking towards the exit of the room. Closing the door behind her, Hinata went back. She walked along the corridors of the mansion where she spent her childhood. This mansion brought back many memories in her head, good and bad. Suddenly, she stopped and turned her head to the right. Her gaze caught on an open door. She remembered what kind of room this was. Hinata walked up to the door, opened it and entered. It was an unremarkable room. It would not have been any different from many others if it weren't for the large mirror that stood by one of the walls. Hinata walked up to it. From the reflection of the mirror, a beautiful girl dressed in a white kimono with sunflowers looked at Hinata. Her hair in the reflection was gathered in a bun and secured with a hairpin. After standing in front of the mirror for a while, Hinata touched her lips. She ran her fingers over them. Memories of old days flashed through Hinata's head. Hinata Hyuga, the young man with brown hair coldly called the little girl to him. Come to me. I have something to talk to you about. Yes, father. A little girl approached the man. She had short dark blue hair and white eyes. I have good news for you. Father. The girl smiled. She wanted to believe that her father had noticed her efforts, that he would praise her for her diligence, that he would call her daughter for the first time. There was an incredibly beautiful girl standing next to her dad. The girl didn't know who it was. She hadn't seen her before. Meet Hinata, this is Beishufu. She will be your mentor. What? Hinata's surprise knew no bounds. She could have expected anything, but another teacher. What will she teach me? The girl asked uncertainly. She will teach you what will help you in fulfilling the mission that I will entrust to you. Hinata's eyes lit up with delight. So that's it. Dad had decided to give her a task. He had decided that she was a worthy daughter. Hinata's joy knew no bounds, but after the next phrase, all her hopes crumbled to dust. She will teach you seduction. The man's cold voice sounded like a bolt from the blue. Wah! Hinata's throat went dry. She couldn't believe it. Her father wanted to make her. You will have to seduce the Jinchuriki. The man continued, not even giving his child time to finish his thoughts. This Jinchuriki's name is. Suddenly, she took her hand away from her face and hit the mirror. The mirror fragments flew in different directions, and small wounds appeared on Hinata's hand. Using a medical jutsu, Hinata healed her wounds on her hand and turned towards the door to leave. Already standing in the doorway, she turned around for the last time and looked at the room. The room in which she left all her dreams and regrets, the room where the former Hinata Hyuga, a sweet, shy girl, died. Naruto exhaled tiredly, massaging his temples. I'm so tired. I've been getting tired a lot lately. Naruto thought, I'll have to give my assistants more things to do. Clones are good, but if they all do different things and dissipate almost at the same time, Then I'll get too much different information and I'll quickly become psychologically worn out. Although it's faster than listening to reports from assistants. I need to go and unwind. Naruto walked up to the large window that stood in his office. It's a shame I couldn't go with the kids to visit the Hyugas. But if I had sent a clone, then Sasuke or Boruto would have definitely checked whether it was a clone or the real one, and they would have definitely been offended if they found out it was a clone. Pooh. A smoke cloud appeared behind Naruto, from which an exact copy of Naruto emerged a moment later. You know what you have to do, Naruto stated, turning towards his clone. Yes, I know, Naruto's clone answered. And what will you do while I'm working? You're my clone. You should know. You created me when you hadn't yet decided where you were going to go. The clone crossed his arms over his chest. So no, I don't know. I'll go for a walk around Konoha. Relax a bit. At least use henge, the clone said, sitting down at the table. I know. Naruto disappeared after saying these words. In an instant, Naruto Uzumaki, the strongest shinobi of his generation, disappeared from his office and no one was able to detect it until the very end. Cough cough cough. Naruto was kneeling and spitting out strange, completely black blood. Instead of his left hand he had a stump, which he held with his surviving hand. Who could have known, cough cough, that there was still Otsutsuki? Ahem. And you are strong, but weakened, poisoned. An unusual man stood opposite Naruto, stroking his chin. He had long white hair, 2 small horns and pale blue eyes. He wore a completely black keikogi with a white belt and a pair of tengu geta on his feet. Remind me, what is your name? I would like to remember the name of such a strong warrior. I will carve it on my hand. Having said the last words, this man showed his right hand, on which were drawn many words in different incomprehensible languages. Cough ha, go away, cough. After his words, Naruto spat out all the black blood that had accumulated in his mouth and stood up from his knees. Ha, I like you, the stranger smiled, clapping his hands. What a mood, what willpower. It's decided. Your skull will be the next in my collection. You deserve it, but if you were in better shape. Having quietly said the last words, the stranger approached Naruto incredibly quickly and with one blow of his left hand sent him into the wall, which somehow remained intact until that moment. Naruto crashed into the wall with a loud sound, so much so that it was covered with cracks and a large dent formed at the place of the blow. After Naruto slid off it, he tried to stand up to his full height, but Otsutsuki, slightly bending his knees, jumped towards Naruto at incredible speed. Finding himself close, the stranger hit Naruto in the stomach with his knee. The Hokage tried to block Otsutsuki's blow, but it was so strong that Naruto again went flying and pierced the wall he had previously flown into with his body. Naruto. Kurama's voice sounded in Naruto's head. It's not time, Kurama. It's not time yet. After flying a few meters, Naruto fell to the ground. Naruto, are you sure you need to use this method? There is no other way, Naruto thought. He is too strong, and I am too weak. Apparently I am poisoned, but when? It doesn't matter. I can't harm him, and so there is a chance. A chance that he will die. But along with him, you too. I am the Hokage. It is my duty to die for my people. Naruto thought about this and rose from the ground. What? Are you going to use something strong? Otsutsuki asked with a grin, only to be at Naruto's side the next moment and grab him by the throat. Sorry, but I'm tired of this. It's time to die. Ha. The moment Otsutsuki's right hand pierced Naruto's stomach, a fountain of blood burst out of his mouth. Are you saying something? Otsutsuki asked with a mad grin. Technique. Trying to get his hand out of his enemy's body, Otsutsuki was unable to do so, because Naruto had a death grip on the hand that had pierced him. Technique. Great. Sacrifice. Having said the last words, a red sphere began to form around Naruto, which in a few seconds completely absorbed both of them. What? We'll meet in the pure world, were the last words that Otsutsuki could hear, because the next moment he was gone. A huge explosion thundered in the middle of Konoha. It was so powerful that all living things were destroyed at a great distance. Nothing could survive at the epicenter of the explosion. For many decades, these lands will remain lifeless until the aggressive chakra that burst out at the moment of the explosion completely disappears. Commentary on Part 1, Heroes Die in Ignorance. I write when inspired. Oh yeah, the next chapter will be shorter. But maybe more explanatory of what's going on. Part 2, Is This a Clean World? Comment to Part 2, Is This a Clean World? In GT, Sebas Baskerville _SDD. Oh yeah, The next chapter will be shorter. But maybe more explanatory of what's going on. Verdict. No, it didn't work. Where am I? A voice rang out in the dark space. What is this place? The speaker's voice was anxious and surprised. Trying to look around, he turned his attention to his hand. It was somehow strange. Something in the back of his mind was telling him that something was wrong. It took him a few seconds to figure out what exactly was wrong. And when he realized it, he exclaimed, because the hand he was looking at was his left hand. What? He said in horror. I only have a stump left of her. Stop. And why did I only have a stump left? And who am I? After the voice spoke the last words, an unbearable pain pierced his head and he began to remember. Shelter. Academy. Team number 7. Rasengan. War. Wedding. Utsutsuki. AAA. In the empty space for some time one could hear the cry of pain of a person who remembers his whole life and experiences all his unpleasant moments. We figured out who I am. Naruto Uzumaki said in a hoarse voice, looking around. But where am I? There was a strange space around Naruto, in which there was nothing. No sun, no moon, nothing else. Only emptiness. Naruto himself was somehow hanging in this emptiness, and could move along it. He felt like he could. He wasn't sure about this, because in this emptiness, there were no landmarks by which one could understand that he had moved from the place. Naruto assumed the lotus position and began to think about everything. I probably died, Naruto said after a few minutes of reasoning. No, not probably. Exactly. So this is the pure world. Naruto looked at the place he had ended up in once again, this time with greater interest. Yes, that's not how I imagined it. I hope Hinata and the children survived. Ah, how I hope that I didn't hurt many residents with the last technique. Naruto sighed, lowered his head and turned his attention to his chest. In the place where most shinobi have a huge cluster of chakra channels, in the middle of the abdomen, there was a strange glowing orange sphere. It was pulsating and emitting waves of energy that spread across the chest. After looking at this sphere for a while, Naruto ran his hand over his chest, trying to touch the sphere, but he couldn't. Strange. What could it be? After looking at the sphere a little more, Naruto tried to massage his neck and was surprised when, touching his neck, he felt something foreign on it, which he had not felt before. What? A collar. Naruto's neck was wrapped in a collar, on which hieroglyphs were drawn, which were constantly moving and could, every now and then, flow onto the skin, but after a while return to the collar again. Uzumaki tried to carefully remove the collar, but when he tried to pull it a little, sparks went through the collar and hit Naruto. What? Naruto exclaimed after the collar hit him with a discharge. I don't like this anymore. Naruto brought both hands to the collar and tried to tear it apart. And he began to succeed. The collar began to stretch, but Naruto did not celebrate his victory for long. The collar had grown into his body and when he tried to remove it, it brought great pain, but Uzumaki did not stop. At that moment, when it seemed that just a little more and the collar would tear apart, a voice sounded in Naruto's head. Why am I doing this? This collar doesn't bother me at all. Maybe we should leave him. Yes, leave it. After all, it is completely safe. What? Naruto's head was in a mess. After all, he had heard this voice before. This voice had haunted him all his life. It had taught him all his life. It was his voice, but it was somehow unreal. Emotionless. Not alive. Stop. No. Stop. No. Stop. The voice in his head ordered Naruto to stop. Not to take off the collar. To fall asleep. The voice in his head merged with Naruto's thoughts and subdued him. His gaze went dark, and Naruto would have obeyed if something strange hadn't happened. The sphere in Naruto's stomach, which he had already forgotten about, began to pulse more and more often and emit more and more waves of energy. At a certain point, these waves began to resonate with each other, thereby strengthening. And at one point, these waves reached Naruto's neck and swept away some of the hieroglyphs that remained on his body. Naruto's lifeless eyes suddenly came to life and he began to try to free himself from the collar with redoubled force. What was that? It doesn't matter. What's more important is to take off the collar. Stop. Shut up. Don't do this. Shut up. Don't make a mistake. Don't SM. Don't you dare order me around. Naruto shouted, tearing the collar off. The collar parts flew in different directions. A moment later, these parts began to melt right before his eyes, and Naruto grabbed his head. A huge number of hieroglyphs that were on the collar before began to fly out of his body. Strange memories began to tear his head apart. As if they were his, but at the same time, in these memories, the events familiar to him seemed to be shown from a different angle. Naruto. The young man, who was massaging his temples, standing in front of Naruto, sighed tiredly. Do you really think that the daughter of the head of the Hyuga clan just fell in love with someone like you? What's wrong with that? Naruto asked in surprise, squatting and choosing flowers. Ah, Naruto. The man sighed tiredly once more. I am your friend and, as a friend, I will tell you everything I think. She is hiding something, Naruto. There is definitely something not right here. I am sure. Shikamaru. Naruto stood up, not turning to the speaker. I think you're going too far. She certainly can't hide anything from me, because we love each other, and lovers have no secrets from each other. Naruto, I understand everything, but I think you need to get some rest, Shikamaru. Naruto turned to Shikamaru and placed a hand on his shoulder. Naruto had a friendly smile on his face and his eyes were half closed. How much sleep have you had lately? About 8 hours. Shikamaru began uncertainly. In a week. We have a lot to do after the war and Shikamaru. Naruto began in a friendly tone. You need to rest. Things won't go anywhere. Ah, maybe you're right, Naruto. Shikamaru said, massaging his eyes. Okay, Naruto. I'm going to go get some sleep for an hour or two. But know that we'll come back to this conversation. Bye. After Shikamaru left, Naruto stood still for a moment. He stood motionless for a few minutes, but suddenly he stirred. Naruto turned around, as if looking for someone. It's strange. Naruto began. Where's Shikamaru? We talked to him, I think. But then I got distracted and overheard him. Ah, that's right. He said he was going to sleep. He's been tired lately. Naruto was bent into a fetal position and screaming. His mind was breaking. He was starting to understand. To understand that his whole life was a farce. To understand that he was being used. And the sphere that was in his chest began to change. Its color changed. And after a few minutes, instead of an orange sphere, there was a bright red sphere. Its waves passed through the body, changing it. The blue eyes changed and became red, like blood. Ah! A piercing scream came out of Naruto's throat. There was so much pain and despair in that voice that the space surrounding the Uzumaki was covered with cracks. Lies. Lies. There were lies everywhere. Naruto's scream sent a wave through the air, widening the cracks in space even more. Why? Why didn't I understand anything? Naruto whispered. Why? Bloody tears started to flow from Naruto's eyes. They ran down his face and evaporated the moment they stopped touching Naruto. Was right. Yes. Perhaps what he wanted to do was the right decision. I shouldn't have stopped him. Naruto's hoarse voice walked through the void. The voice was emotionless, not alive. If I had the opportunity, I would have helped him. Yes, I helped. I'm so tired, Naruto said, closing his eyes. I just need to get some sleep. After Naruto closed his eyes and pulled his legs up, he fell asleep. The red sphere inside Naruto began to slow down its pulsation and, at one point, completely stopped. At that moment, the sphere suddenly expanded and completely absorbed Naruto's body. Nothing happened for a while, but suddenly the sphere began to rotate and decrease in size, and more cracks began to form in the space around the sphere. Suddenly, the sound of breaking glass was heard and the space that surrounded the sphere began to collapse. After a few moments, it became possible to see that the sphere was in a dark space similar to the void, but with stars. The sphere moved sharply. After some time, the sphere flew up to a huge object. It was a planet. The sphere headed closer and closer, into the atmosphere. Now it became possible to distinguish trees, stones and people. The sphere flew up to some populated area. The entire settlement was calm, only some people were running on one building or another, but they did not notice the sphere. The sphere flew in the opposite direction from the stone faces that were created in the rock near which this city stood. But halfway there, it changed its route and flew a little to the side. After a while, it flew up to a cave from which screams were coming. There, in the cave, were 3 people. 2 were standing in front of each other with weapons. One of them had a small baby in his hands, with yellow hair, to whose throat he put his weapon. The second was standing near a woman, in whose hands was another similar baby, but this one already had red hair. The sphere flew up to the woman with the baby. And, at that moment, when the sphere was right above the child, it merged with the baby. At that moment, the child twitched, but the mother did not notice it. After all her attention was on her second child, who was in danger. Comment to Part 2, is this a clean world? This emptiness In the future, it seems, will not matter. Ps. If anyone wants, they can write the names of the parts so that they are somehow distinguishable. But make sure there is a connection with the chapter smiley face. With the titles of chapters 1 and 2, I'll help you with the titles of chapters. Part 3 Kindergarten, Pants in Blood, Children are very kind to us. Comment to Part 3 Kindergarten, Pants in Blood, Children are very kind to us. Still need help with chapter titles? Pay for this mention in a comment. I figured out why the previous second chapter showed that it came out on the 12th. I just started writing it on the 12th and that day I accidentally released it and immediately moved it to drafts, but it saved that it came out. Logical and convenient. So now I will watch carefully so as not to release an unfinished chapter again. Ps. Thanks to Michael_Solo for the chapter title. I laughed heartily. You are a poet. Get up already. A loud cry suddenly sounded near the ear. The little boy, frightened by this cry, jumped up and fell from the bed onto the floor. Ah ha ha ha. Children's laughter was heard. The little boy got up from the floor and looked at his offenders who were standing in the common room. Little children, about 6 to 7 years old, with brown or black hair, only the color of their eyes was different, were mostly dressed in multicolored t-shirts and shorts. The boy who fell was about the same age. Unlike most of them, he had red spiky hair and blue eyes. His face was oval, and there was a bandage on his nose. All the children looked at the girl with mocking glances. Why are you doing this to me? The boy said in an offended voice. What? Are you going to complain to the teachers? Baka Sejo emerged from the crowd with a nasty grin. He was a head taller than most of the children and had green hair pulled back into a ponytail. He had bracelets on his right hand. No one will believe you anyway. Right, monster. Don't call me a monster. The boy said, clenching his fists in anger. I'm just like you. I'm ordinary. Yeah, Baka drawled. And who hit Naoko yesterday? So hard that he broke a couple of ribs. No, not you. Yes, I believed it. A monster. Naoki called my parents' names. The boy said quietly, gritting his teeth. Yes. And he said that you just attacked him. And you know what? I believe him. After all, you are crazy. And your parents are probably the same. Don't you dare insult my parents. The boy shouted. You don't know them. And what do you know? Baka said, hanging over the boy. You don't know anything about them either, Jun. After all, they abandoned you after you were born. Shut up. The boy hit Sejo in the face. The unexpected blow almost made him fall, but the children standing behind him managed to catch him. Ah, someone shouted. Jun is beating up Buck. Suddenly the door to the room opened and a person came out. It was a girl of about 20 years old with green hair. She was dressed in a light blue tunic with a belt and black breeches. She had sandals on her feet. What happened here? She asked sternly, looking at all the children in the room. She turned her attention to Buck, who was holding his nose, from which blood was flowing. Oh, Cammy, what happened to you? The girl ran to Buck and began to examine him, looking for any other damage. At this time, the other children tried to tell her about what happened, but they were talking all the time at the same time. Because of this, the girl could not understand anything. Quiet, the girl ordered loudly. After her order, all the children fell silent as if on command. The girl turned to Sejo. What happened? Who beat you up? It was Jun. A childish voice spoke loudly again. Yes, it was Jun. Jun started it. I said quiet. The girl said to the children, turning to Sejo. Did he do this? Yes, they are telling the truth, said Baka, holding his nose. He attacked me for no reason. He's lying. He's the first to. Jun tried to justify himself, but he couldn't. Stop. The girl clapped her hands, turning to the other children. Whoever claims that Jun started it, raise your hand. Many children immediately raised their hands up. A few of them hesitated for a few seconds, but eventually raised their hands too. Looking at this forest of hands, the girl chuckled and turned towards Jun. Approaching him, she grabbed his ear and lifted him up. Well, I see. First you beat up Naoko, and now you decided to beat up Sejo. The girl said angrily. You're a monster. You've gone completely nuts. He was the first. Shut up. The girl slapped the child. Hee. Came laughter from the crowd of children. Quiet. The girl said loudly, turning her head. Jun clenched his fists. You, Jun, have crossed all boundaries. Teacher Chinshetsu didn't punish you yesterday. She decided to forgive you, and now you continue to show your nasty character. But I don't. I said shut up. The girl shouted at Jun. I didn't allow you to talk. Respect your elders. For this, you will sit and think about your behavior in the Kuyaratame cell. Author's note, literally, peace. I couldn't find any information about ancient Japanese methods of punishing children, so I wrote my idea about it. I may be wrong and they don't have it there, but if anyone knows something similar or some alternative, I'm waiting for help in the comments. Just in case. I think that such upbringing is very wrong and should not be applied to children. Having said the last words, the girl took Jun by the hand and began to drag him by force towards the exit. Jun tried to resist, but when he and the teacher approached the stairs that led down, a young man with black hair and brown eyes, dressed in jinbei, clothes that consisted of a cotton jacket and short shorts, rose from there. On his feet were geta, wooden sandals. Seeing the girl, he smiled and winked. Oh, hi Nana. He greeted the girl happily. What's up tonight? Turning his attention to the child that Nana was leading, the guy recognized him and the man's face was distorted by a grimace of disgust and he asked with irritation. What are you messing around with? What have you done? The guy asked, looking unkindly at Jun. Maybe you need help. I'm not busy at the moment. Yes, I need help. The one they called Nana glanced at Jun. Yesterday he beat up Naoko, and today he tried to beat up Baka, but I barely made it in time. Just a little more and he started it. You see, Areta, he doesn't even want to admit his guilt, Nana sighed feigningly. Teacher Chinshetsu decided to forgive him yesterday, but I'm not that kind, so I'm taking him behind the orphanage. Kuyaratame's camera, I'll help you, otherwise who knows, maybe he'll hurt you too. Areta walked up to Jun and without ceremony grabbed him by the scruff of the neck and put him on his shoulder. Jun tried to resist, but he couldn't do anything, because Areta was stronger than Jun and held him tightly. Listen, Nana, where is Chinshetsu? I haven't seen her today. Going down the stairs, Areta turned his head towards the girl. She went away on business, Nana answered him cheerfully. I'm in charge until the evening today. It's clear. At the edge of the forest, which stood very close to the orphanage, there was a large tree. It was about 5 meters high, and it would take about 3 children, about 6 to 7 years old, to wrap their arms around the trunk of this tree. And the branches of this tree were so thick that they could probably support 5 or more adults. Chains were attached to one of these branches, which held a wooden cage so that it was about a meter above the ground. On one of the wooden bars was written, Kuyaratame's cell. In this cage was a child. It was Jun Fuko. He was sitting so that his legs slipped through the bars and hung above the ground, unable to reach it. If he had been able to climb out of this cage, he would have done so, but it was made in such a way that children can dangle their legs, but they cannot crawl through themselves, although very small children could do it, but this is unlikely. Be patient, Jun, the child said quietly. You only have a year left. A year and they'll give you an apartment and you'll be able to leave. And you'll be able to Suddenly Jun's gaze dimmed and he relaxed. He stopped swinging his legs from side to side. Jun began to close his eyes, but then he jerked up and hit the bars with his hand. Ouch, Jun said with resentment. What was that? Did I fall asleep? But I'm not sleepy. What was I thinking? Yes. When I leave the shelter, I will be able to live a different life. And it's wrong to take revenge. After all, we are all residents of the same village. We are all, like one big family. Jun said the last words quietly, so that only he could hear them. For a while, nothing happened. A warm wind rustled the leaves, birds sang their songs, and in the distance you could The crow sat on the top of the cage. Jun, after rummaging around in the pockets of his shorts for a while, pulled out a slice of dried meat. He tore off a piece and gave the crow the treat. For a while, she looked at the palm with the meat, and then, carefully, grabbed it and flew away. It's strange, Jun said quietly. The crows aren't afraid of me, but other animals shy away. Especially cats. It's strange. Already wanting to close his eyes to listen to the birds singing, Jun suddenly looked towards the forest. It seemed to him that he saw movement there. Having looked carefully into the thicket, he finally found what caught his attention. It was a man. He looked like a young tall man, dressed in an orange shirt with black stripes, black pants and sandals. He also wore a white cloak fastened with a red rope in the chest area. This man's hair was yellow. This man reminded Jun of someone, but he could not understand who, because part of this man's face was hidden by a bandage. And the eye that was not hidden under the bandage was red. This man was also distinguished by the fact that he seemed to be slightly transparent, and the outline of his body glowed slightly red. For some time, Jin and this man looked at each other without saying a word. But then, Jun already opened his mouth to ask something, when suddenly, "Hey, look!" Shouts came from behind Jun. The surprise scared Jun and he turned towards the shouters. They still haven't let him go. Well, to the point. A group of children approached the cage where Jun was sitting. The group was led by a boy who was carefully holding his chest. He, like most of the children, wore a t-shirt and shorts, but unlike them, he also wore earrings in his ears, but today he was missing them, because yesterday he lost one of them in a fight. After Jun had looked at those who had frightened him, he turned towards the forest again, but there was no one there. Jun turned towards those who had just arrived. Naoko. Jun looked angrily at the guy. Why did you come here? To gloat. Oh, what are you saying? Naoko smiled nastily. Of course not. Let's not lie. We both know what it's for. Jun looked at the small stones that the children from Naoko's group were holding in their hands. Not only for that, Jun, Naoko smiled even wider. I came to take revenge on you for yesterday. So let me beat your face in again after they let me out. No, Jun. Naoko raised his free hand, beckoning his men. Several children who were holding stones approached. You are too strong and tenacious to fight with you. And this is beyond my dignity. So. Seeing the children raise their hands, in which they were clutching stones, Jun covered his head with his hands and closed his eyes. Fire. After the shout, stones were thrown at Jun. Many of them hit the bars and did not hit Jun, which made him happy, but some flew in and hurt him. Let him know what justice is like. I've arrived. A tall, no longer young girl with long graying hair entered the door. She was dressed in a blue kimono with a red belt, and on her feet she had black open shoes. Teacher Chinshetsu. The children's joyful cries were her answer. Oh, Chinshetsu smiled cheerfully. Did you miss me? Yes. Where is Nana? And the teacher Nana and Areta? Here we are. The people they were talking about quickly came down the stairs. They looked like they had been beaten. Both of their hair was in disarray, and on Nana's neck you could see a bruise that looked like a hickey, which she quickly hid. Hee, youth, Chinshetsu said cheerfully, but the look she gave Nana made it clear that she would receive a reprimand. And I heard that you will be staying until the evening. Areta began to speak uncertainly. Young man, Chinshetsu began, smiling. While I was walking here, I heard that your father was looking for some scoundrel. Wasn't that you by any chance? Oh, right, Areta said, as if remembering something. I have to go. All the best to you. After watching the young man run away, Chinshetsu cast a withering glance at Nana, sending shivers down her spine. Turning her gaze to the children, she noticed that some were missing. Where is Sejo? Where is Tetsuya? Sadeho is in the room, Nana said, every now and then glancing at the door from which Chinshetsu had come out. Yes, why is he sitting there? He is usually the noisiest one here, the woman said, looking very intently at Nana. And his nose is broken, said Nana. Yes, and why? June broke it for him. A child's voice sounded from the crowd. Where is Jun himself? Chinshetsu looked at Nana in such a way that she was ready to disappear at that very moment. He's in Kuyaratami's cell. Another child's voice sounded. What? Chinshetsu exclaimed. A second later, she said in a very angry voice, we should have burned that cage. How long has he been sitting there? Nana began uncertainly. About 5 hours. What? There was so much anger in Chinshetsu's voice that it could have killed. How could you? But, he's a monster. Why should we? Slap. Chinshetsu hit Nana in the face with her palm, causing her cheek to turn red. He's a child, Nana. Just like everyone else. SKKZ. Nana held her cheek, grinding her teeth. We'll talk about this later, but for now give me the key. I'll go free Jun. Nana took the key that was hanging on a rope from her neck and handed it to Chinshetsu. The woman ran out of the orphanage, and the children who had been standing nearby during this entire conversation ran after her. Nana remained in the hall. At the moment when the door closed behind the last child, she took the vase that was standing on the table next to her and threw it at the wall. It broke with a ringing sound, and Nana began to climb the stairs, muttering to herself. I will not forgive. After Chinshetsu ran out of the house, she ran towards the edge of the forest where the cage was. As she approached, she noticed a group of children, led by Naoko, throwing stones at the cage where Jun was. Jun was already covered in scratches from the sharp edges of these stones. Stop! Chinshetsu shouted. Her scream scared almost all the children and they threw stones on the ground, and some tried to run away. Jun lowered his hands and looked at Shinsetsu. There was joy in his eyes. He was glad that she had come. But one of the children, who was not scared by Shinsetsu's scream, threw his last stone at Jun and ran away. This stone flew towards Jun, and he did not notice it. As a result, this stone hit Jun right in the temple, which is why he went limp. June. The woman's scream was filled with horror. Running up to the cage, Shinsetsu opened it using the key. Jun's body began to fall out of the cage, but the woman managed to grab him and carefully lower him to the ground. Jun, wake up. The children who were running after Shinsetsu gathered around the body. The woman checked Jun's pulse. It was weak. It was as if a weight had been lifted from the teacher's soul. She stood up and turned to the children. Somebody go to the hospital. Call the medics. Just hurry. Several children quickly ran away. Some of the children looked behind Shinsetsu in horror. What? The woman turned around and saw something she hadn't expected. Jun was on all fours like a predator, and some kind of red glow was starting to form around his body. His fangs and nails had lengthened, and his eyes were red, with vertical pupils. Run! Shinsetsu shouted before Jun struck her with his clawed hand. AAA. Comment to Part 3 Kindergarten, Pants in Blood, children are very kind to us. Should I switch to first person or continue in third person? Does anyone know if Japanese names are declined? I can't figure it out. Part 4 Pass it on. Commentary on Part 4 Pass it on. Surprise, the king is back. Sorry for the long absence. I was listening to the song about Rillianer, the keeper of traditions. I also have a question for you. Should I put spaces after paragraphs, dialogues, etc.? Or without them? What do you think is better? I'm waiting for your opinion on this very important issue. In my opinion, it's better with spaces, but I don't know, maybe it's just easier for me. You can even write your answer without reading. If I get 5 for paragraphs, then I'll add spaces around the same day. Peace. Thanks again for the original chapter title Michael_Solo. PYPYH. The old man was smoking a long pipe, sitting in front of a table with many papers that were collected in different piles on the left and right hand. Behind the man there was a large window, from which a beautiful view of the street and the roofs of the buildings opened up. The man sitting there was Hiruzen Sarutobi, a shinobi and also the Hokage of Konoha, one of the great villages. He was dressed in a white haori with a red kimono and a wide hat with a kanji on it that meant fire kuo. Hiruzen remained motionless for several minutes, lost in his dark thoughts, and continued smoking. He did not care that the room was filling with smoke with each passing minute, making it harder to breathe. His gaze was unfocused. Many thoughts swarmed in his mind. Stupid old man, Hiruzen said angrily, hitting the table. His blow caused some of the papers to fall to the floor. I should have calculated everything, but I was stupid. The front door opened quietly. Hiruzen gritted his teeth. He was angry. Everything had gone wrong. His agents had not managed to prevent the release of the Biju. They were too late. By the time the Anbu squad arrived, the Jinchuriki had already killed many. Of all those who lived in the orphanage, only 7 survived, 1 caregiver who was in the house, and 6 children, although some of them were injured, both physically and psychologically. Most of them are now afraid of the color red, but that is not important now. Although the leak of information was prevented, the damage caused by the Biju was difficult to explain. Some, unreliable, shinobi had to be blamed to hush up the matter. It was impossible for ordinary citizens and shinobi, especially clan members, to find out about this. Although, if not for the timely help. You're getting old, old friend. The man standing at the entrance said in a hoarse voice. You're losing your grip. Ahem, you should air out the room, Hiruzen, otherwise you could suffocate in here. Hiruzen looked up and saw the newcomer. It was none other than Danzo Shimura, an old friend and at the same time, Hiruzen's rival. He was dressed in a white shirt and a black cape that covered his entire right side of his torso, as well as everything below the waist. The air in your dungeon is worse than here, so you don't have to tell me about it, Hiruzen said, calming down. He took a couple of deep breaths. Ahem. Hiruzen cleared his throat and looked at Danzo again. He was still standing where he had been before, at the entrance. It's still worth airing out the office, thought Hiruzen, after which he turned to Danzo. Why did you come? I don't believe you came to drink sake with me, not now. Danzo stood in front of Hiruzen's desk. They looked at each other in silence for a while. We need to reseal the Biju into a new Jinchuriki, Danzo said. We don't have. Hiruzen began, but suddenly fell silent. No, do you really mean? Yes, I propose using the fourth Hokage's second son, Minato Namikaze. No, Danzo, I promised Minato. Hiruzen, you also promised that you would protect his first child, but you yourself sent him to this ill-fated orphanage. I sent him there on the advice of the elders, including yours. Don't say that I forced you, I just suggested it. Danzo. Hiruzen began to raise his voice. I have everything prepared in corn. All that remains is your consent and the children themselves. TCH. You're prepared. Hiruzen. Several days have passed since the incident. I think you were preparing for this too. Be quiet, Hiruzen said angrily. My people will be doing the resealing in your hideout. It will be safer that way. Of course, Hiruzen. I didn't expect more. There was silence in the room for a while. None of the old shinobi said a word. Eventually, Danzo turned away and headed for the exit of the room. Almost at the very entrance, he stopped and said, Don't act like a kind grandfather, Hiruzen, not in front of me. I don't understand about. You didn't just do everything so that no one would know that Naruto Uzumaki, the son of the fourth, you were preparing for such a scenario from the very beginning. Surely after the report on Jun's genes. Be quiet, Danzo, or I'll have to cut your tongue. Don't forget who you're talking to. I'm still the Hokage, Hiruzen said, burning Danzo's back. Old age is no joy, Hiruzen, you will die someday, Danzo said calmly, tugging at the handle. But I'll die and they won't remember me as the scariest old man in Konoha. But you. I will die knowing that I am remembered as I was, Hiruzen. Silence fell in the office. Hiruzen looked at Danzo's back, and Danzo looked at Hiruzen with his head slightly turned. My people will watch one clan while yours are busy with another job. You don't mind, do you? If this is the clan that was seen near Jun before the incident, then yes. Yes, I meant the Hugo clan. Okay, keep an eye on them, I hope if you find anything, you'll share it with me. Of course, Danzo said, after which he closed the door. TCH, Hiruzen clicked his tongue. He continued to sit, smoking his pipe. Ready in 5 minutes, said a man standing in front of the glass, wearing a cloak that hid his entire body and a mask with an animal depicted on it. Behind the glass was a room with many different signs on the walls, floor and ceiling. Also in the middle of the room opposite each other were 2 slightly tilted tables with chains and handcuffs on them. Just like the whole room, these tables were covered with signs. The barriers have been set up, Hokage-sama, Danzo-sama, said the man in the cloak, turning to the people standing behind him. All that remains is to deliver the vessels. Okay, Tiger, okay. Hiruzen said and quietly spoke, approaching the glass. I hope Naruto can withstand this. Hope that we can reseal the Biju, Hiruzen. Danzo said in a hoarse voice, also approaching the glass and looking around the room. Hokage-sama. A voice came from behind Hiruzen. Turning around, Hiruzen saw a man who, like many others in the room, was wearing a cloak that completely hid his body, and on his face was a white mask with a fox with red patterns. Is there a chance that the former Jinchuriki, will survive after the Biju is extracted? Fox. I hope. He will die, Fox. Danzo answered, looking at the Anbu shinobi with a cold gaze. The voice he used to address the shinobi was threatening. Even if he survives after extracting the Biju, he will die soon. The Uzumaki clan genes are too weak in him. Danzo, we must hope for the best, Hiruzen said, turning his head towards Shimura. There are chances, they almost equal to 0. But don't be afraid, Fox, I think our magnanimous Hokage will allow you to bury the body of the former vessel of the 9 tails. For a moment, the room was dead silent. The Anbu shinobi stood silently before the elder shinobi of Konoha. After a minute of silence, he bowed, walked to the wall and stood there like a statue. Danzo. Knock knock. Hearing the knock, Hiruzen and Shimura turned their heads and looked at the room behind the glass. A man dressed in a medic nin outfit was knocking on the glass, getting attention. After making sure that he was being looked at, he stepped back, revealing tables on which 2 children were chained, as well as dozens of shinobi who were standing in the corners of the room, ready to perform hand seals at a moment's notice. Both children were around 6 to 7 years old. One of them had dark blue eyes and yellow hair, while the other had red hair and blue eyes. They were both completely naked. The boy with yellow hair did not move and did not try to free himself in any way. He was unconscious, while the red-haired boy kept trying to turn his head, trying to look around the room. You could see fear in his eyes. Jun tried to say something, but he couldn't because of the gag. Yes, Hiruzen and Danzo wouldn't hear him, the sound didn't go through the glass. Shall we begin? Tiger asked, turning towards the Hokage. There was silence for a while. Seconds passed. Hiruzen looked at Jun's fear, at Naruto's unconscious body. Thousands of thoughts ran through his mind. The pause dragged on. Even Danzo glanced sideways at Hiruzen, waiting for his verdict. The tiger froze, his hand raised, ready to give the order to begin at any moment. Tension hung in the room. No one knew what would happen next. Hiruzen could either cancel everything or continue. But now, Hiruzen had decided everything. He had made his choice. The Hokage pronounced his verdict. Begin the transfer and sealing of the Biju into the new Jinchuriki. Tiger lowered his hand. The shinobi behind the glass made their first seals. Nothing could be changed now. There would be a new Jinchuriki. And the old one, well, his chances of survival were extremely small. A strange sound was heard from behind. Hiruzen turned his head to see the Anbu shinobi wearing a fox mask fall to his knees. Tears began to flow from under the eye slits. Hiruzen turned away and focused all his attention on resealing. For a while, nothing happened. Everything was quiet. Through the glass, you could clearly see the fear in Jun's eyes, which in an instant turned into horror. Until then, Naruto, who was unconscious, also opened his eyes, full of horror. They both screamed, but they were not heard. At first, they were not heard. At that moment, when red chakra began to flow out of Jun's stomach, the scream of horror and pain from Jun and Naruto became so powerful that the glass began to crack and the scream began to leak through the barriers that did not let in sounds. Ah! The children's double scream was so deafening that some shinobi in the room covered their ears, trying to somehow protect themselves from this horror. Only Hiruzen, Danzo, and the Anbu with the fox mask did not move. It will be long hours of torment, Danzo dryly remarked, glancing sideways at Hiruzen. And he quietly added, so that no one would hear him. For this we will definitely suffer after death. A man wearing a cloak and a mask with a fox image moved silently through the trees. On his back he carried the body of a child with red hair. The child did not move or make a sound. One might think that he was dead, but this was not true. The child was alive, but unconscious. Although he survived, which surprised all the doctors, they assured him that he did not have long to live. No one survives after that. The chances were almost zero. But the man wanted to believe that this child would survive. He really wanted his faith to come true. But he understood that it would not happen. He was not allowed to take the child to himself, although he wanted to give this unfortunate child a bit of happiness. At least in the last weeks, if not days of his life. But he was not allowed. He was ordered to take him out of the village and abandon him somewhere. And he obeyed. He had to obey. At the edge of the forest there was a house. It was an ordinary house, nothing special. In this house lived a family of 2 old people. All their lives they wanted to have children, but unfortunately the gods did not grant them such an opportunity. And now, after 20 years of their life together, fortune smiled upon them. Darling, the no longer young woman shouted, standing in the doorway of her house, calling her husband. What is it? A man's rough voice came from behind her. There is a child lying at our door, the woman said, looking at the ground in front of the house. What? The man's surprise knew no bounds. He pushed the girl aside and looked for himself. And indeed, there was a child lying on the ground in front of the house. He was barely moving. It felt like he was dead, but no, the man noticed that the child's chest was heaving. The man approached the child and picked him up. The note fell to the ground. The girl came up and picked it up. On that piece of paper was written only one word. Please. The woman raised her eyes and looked at the man. He looked back at her. They looked around as if looking for someone, but finding no one else, they looked at the child and carried him home. The man and woman did not notice how a man with ash-colored hair was hiding in the treetops. Commentary on Part 4, pass it on. Guys, what was the hieroglyph on Hiruzen's hat? I looked it up in the translator. The words fire are very similar to this hieroglyph Huo. P.S. It's 8.41. Sorry guys. Some of my edits didn't make it into the final version of the chapter. There will be a lot of mistakes here. Please forgive me. I screwed up a bit. PPS need help with names. Part 5 Emptiness, Sweet Emptiness. Commentary on Part 5 Emptiness, Sweet Emptiness. I've returned to paragraphs. It's easier for me this way. P.S. Guys, please tell me why it shows me that there were 150 transitions from YouTube. There definitely can't be anything there. One reason, it's not finished and that's it. Where am I? A voice rang out in the empty space. Huh. The owner of the voice was a 6-year-old boy with red hair. It was Jun Fuka, an orphan who had recently lived in an orphanage, but due to the release of the Biju, he lost his home. The child's last memory before falling into unconsciousness was of being in a room with strange symbols, and opposite him, just like Jun himself, lay a child with yellow hair, chained to a table. A strange place, the boy said quietly, leaning on his hands and looking around. There was empty space around him. There was darkness everywhere. Jun stood up and looked around again. Nothing had changed. Looking down at his feet, the boy saw exactly the same darkness. It seemed that he was just hanging in space, but no, he definitely felt the surface under his feet. Jun decided not to stand still, but to go somewhere, hoping to reach the edge of this place. He listened to himself. His intuition told him to go left. Without thinking, he set off. After a while, Jun kept walking. Having already walked quite a distance, he still could not find the boundaries of this place. He felt uneasy with each passing minute. There were no sounds in this place. None. None at all. And although Jun himself was not very fearful, this place pierced him to the depths of his soul. Jun no longer knew how long he had been there. Maybe minutes, hours, days. During this time he had not eaten even once, but he did not want to. He continued to stubbornly move forward. Suddenly he ran. This oppressive silence began to press on him. He wanted to run away, to hide, but there was emptiness everywhere. Jun did not even hear his steps. He ran, hoping to find the exit faster. Bam! Jun tripped over his own foot and fell. Standing on his knees, Jun hugged himself and began to calm himself. His heart was beating fast. His hands were shaking. Everything around him was starting to scare him, despite the fact that there was emptiness around him. At the moment when Jun wanted to scream to somehow dispel the silence around him, he heard a sound similar to falling drops of water. Cap. Jun perked up. For the first time since he had been there, Jun heard a sound. He raised his head and looked around. There was nothing around that could make such a sound. Drip drip. Jun stood up and looked around again. Suddenly he noticed some movement out of the corner of his eye. He turned around abruptly. Behind him walked a man. He had seen this man somewhere before. Tall, dressed in an orange shirt with black stripes. It seemed that the outline of this man's body glowed red. The same color as one of his eyes. He remembered where he had seen this man. There, at the edge of the forest, where he had been hanging in a cage, before Naoko's group had arrived. But unlike that time, this man did not seem ghostly now. But the man still looked strange. Part of the man's arm, body, and face seemed to be slowly breaking off and crumbling. The man walked purposefully towards Jun. Only at that moment did the boy notice that the stranger had blood dripping from his fingers, and it was this blood that made those sounds. IG Alpha Zu OG Alpha Lu Tau OO, the man's voice was strange. It seemed as if he was speaking through a faulty radio. Drip drip. Without stopping for a second, he continued walking towards Jun. He looked only at him with an unblinking gaze. Jun started to back away. This unknown person started to scare him. He wanted to run away as fast as he could, but the stranger managed to grab his hand. "You're not going to help me," the stranger said in a quiet voice, lifting Jun up with one hand and loudly pronouncing, "Da I Tazu Sigma O Tau Lu O." After that, he grabbed Jun by the neck with his other hand and began to strangle him. Jun tried to resist, but their strength was too unequal. With his last strength, the boy said, "No." After the boy screamed, the man seemed to be blown away by the wind. He flew several meters away from the boy. Jun fell to the ground, breathing in air. Then he raised his head and looked at his attacker. He had already stood up and was about to go to him again. Suddenly, Jun felt tired and began to fall asleep. The last thing he heard was, "I'm not sure what to do." After that, Jun Fuko lost consciousness. Jun opened his blue eyes abruptly and saw the ceiling. For a moment he just stared and didn't move. He thought that everything that had happened to him was a nightmare. He stretched and raised himself from the bed. The next moment he tensed. The room he was in didn't look like the common room at the orphanage. He looked to the left and saw a window, and outside the window he could see a forest. He didn't recognize it. Jun looked around the room. It was quite spacious, with a wide bed next to the window. There was also a table and a few chairs in the room. On the opposite side from Jun was a door. Jun wanted to get out of bed, but when he tried to do so, a burning pain burned his temple and he fell to the floor with a loud sound. A few seconds later, footsteps were heard from behind the door. Jun tried to get up quickly, but his legs wouldn't hold him up and he fell again. As he fell, he hit the nightstand next to his bed, causing it to shake and a vase of flowers to fall off. The vase broke into many pieces with a loud clang. The door opened and a man ran out. He was a man of about 40 years old, wearing a blue shirt and wide pants. Seeing the child lying on the floor, he tried to go over and help him, but Jun hit him on the hand he extended and tried to crawl away, but he hit his back on the bed. Quiet, quiet, the man said calmly, taking one step away from the child and raising his hands, showing that he did not want to harm Jun. Calm down, I wanted to help. After a while, an elderly woman dressed in a gray yukata came out from behind the door. Seeing the child lying on the floor, she rushed towards him. The man stopped her and turned to Jun. Do you mind if my wife cleans up the shards? The man asked in a calm, even voice. Seeing a nod from Jun, he looked at the women. The woman nodded to him and walked slowly towards the child. She crouched down and began to pick up the pieces. Jun kept an eye on her the whole time, watching her every move. After picking up the pieces and wiping the water off with a towel that was draped over her shoulder, she slowly stood up and walked away. Can I help you sit on the bed, otherwise you'll catch a cold? The man asked, not moving from his place and holding his hands with his palms facing the boy. Jun was silent for a few seconds, thinking, and then nodded affirmatively. The man walked up to the child and carefully picked him up, then laid him on the bed. Then he took a step back and crouched down so that the man's eyes were at Jun's eye level. Maybe you want some water or something to eat. After all, you were unconscious for a day and a half. After these words, Jun felt dry mouth and hunger. The growling of his stomach was heard throughout the room. He looked at the man and nodded slowly. Jose, the man said loudly, turning towards the door. Bring some water. Sorry, but the food will have to wait a little, it's not ready yet. The man turned to Jun and smiled. A few seconds later, a woman came carrying a wooden bowl of water. She walked up to the man and handed it over, then left again, turning around and looking at the boy for a moment. The man took one step towards the child and handed him a cup, but seeing how his hands were shaking, he came even closer and gave him the water to drink himself, holding the cup. After Jun finished drinking, he put the cup with the rest of the water on the nightstand and then walked away. Wait here a bit, I'll come with food soon, said the man, after which he left. A few minutes later he returned, carrying in one hand a bowl of some kind of soup with meat floating in it, and in the other a spoon. He approached Jun, sat down and scooped up some food with a spoon, blew on it, and then held out the spoon. The boy began to eat. For a few minutes they were both silent. The man slowly served the food, and the boy slowly ate. Soon a woman entered the room. She stood near the door and waited. Thank you, Jose, the man said after Jun had eaten, handing the dishes to the woman. Now we can talk. The man turned to look at Jun. The boy cocked his head to the side, waiting for the man to say something. I am Otoka Kazuku, and this is, the man said, turning towards the woman. My wife, Jose Kazuku. And what is your name? After the man asked, he waited. Jun did not answer right away. He was silent for a while, looking at the smiling faces of the adults. Soon he opened his mouth and answered in a hoarse voice. Jun. The boy cleared his throat. I see. Nice to meet you, Jun, Otoka replied amiably, continuing, listen, do you remember what happened to you? We found you on our doorstep. Otoki's words were heard somewhere in the background by Jun, and he himself was lost in memories. He remembered that room with the signs and what happened to him there. How something was pulled out of him. And the pain. That pain that tore apart his consciousness. He screamed so hard that he became hoarse and his throat hurt. Then he remembered that dark place where the yellow-haired man tried to kill him. Only now, in this relatively safe place, he was able to think about what had happened to him. And he realized that all this time he was on the verge of death. For some reason, he was sure that he should have died during that ritual and only survived due to chance. This understanding made him tremble. The man who had been saying something all this time, seeing Jun's trembling, decided that his words had caused such an effect. Otoka suddenly approached Jun and, hugging him, began to say, now everything will be fine. Nobody will hurt you. And so they stood. The man who stroked the boy's head, holding him in his arms, and the boy who was so lost in his thoughts that he did not notice. Soon, from the soothing whispers or because of the good dinner, Jun began to fall asleep. In minutes he was already peacefully snoring on the man's shoulder, and a few minutes later the man laid him on the bed and left, quietly closing the door. A week later. June, hand me the basket, Jose said to the boy who was sitting behind her next to the basket, which was completely filled with mushrooms. Quietly getting up from his chair, he walked over to the basket and picked it up with one hand. After walking a few steps, he placed it on the table where Jose stood. Clever June. The woman ruffled the child's hair, then turned her attention to the food being prepared. How do you manage to find so much in the forest? I've been there several times. They find me themselves. June answered her indifferently. Ah ha ha, Jose laughed. The main thing is that problems don't find you. Having fun, Otoka came through the door. He had an armful of firewood in his hands. Of course, Jose answered him cheerfully. What else are we supposed to do in this forest? Well, Otoka answered her, stacking firewood near the stove. I'll take Jun for a while, I need his help. Okay. Jun, who had already approached the chair and was about to sit down again, stopped and turned around. Otoka smiled as he looked at Jose, who in turn put away the knife she was cutting vegetables with for a moment and looked at Otoka. They communicated with just their eyes for a few seconds, after which she said, Of course, just be back for dinner. Don't be afraid, we'll be quick, Otoka said, then turned to Jun and gestured with his hand for him to follow him. They left the house and walked towards the forest. After a few minutes they came to a stump with firewood around it. Otoka approached it and picked up most of it. There were about 5 small pieces of wood left lying on the ground. Can you bring these? He said, pointing to the pieces of wood. I don't want to come back here for them later. Okay, the boy said quietly. On the way back, Otoka talked non-stop. He talked about his worries about winter, firewood, the weather. Jun answered him briefly. The man and the boy turned the corner of the house and stopped in front of a shed under which firewood was already stacked on top of each other. Otoka sat down and began to stuff firewood into this improvised woodpile. Listen, Otoka began to speak, having put all the firewood in place. I won't try to get answers out of you. But I hope that you'll tell us who you are and where you're from someday. Know that we'll listen to you. After saying the last words, Otoka turned around and looked at Jun with a smile. The boy looked away in response. The man sighed. Otoka came up and patted Jun on the head. Jun shuddered in surprise. Otoka noticed this and said, Don't be afraid, Jun. No one will hurt you here, Otoka said, walking around the corner. Let's go home quickly. I think the food is almost ready. Otoka left, and Jun, standing in silence for a few minutes, stroked his head. A smile appeared on Jun's face, but in the same moment it disappeared and he ran into the house. It was getting cold. Lying in his bed, Jun could hear faint voices coming from behind the wall. Maybe he's a shinobi. Not a fact. Are you sure? I think I'm right. Just because we didn't find any traces of the person who brought it doesn't mean he was a shinobi. Maybe he was a huntsman. Approach the house unnoticed, leave the child and the note, and leave just as unnoticed. Okay, let's assume. But that doesn't mean Jun is a shinobi. It's true. The conversation ended and after a few minutes, footsteps were heard from behind the door that led to Jun's room. The door opened. Otoka was standing there. He looked at Jun, who had covered himself with a blanket and closed his eyes, pretending to be asleep. Otoka walked up to Jun and sat on the edge of the bed. He was silent for a few minutes, then said, Your life was so difficult. Yeah, Otoka said quietly, adjusting Jun's blanket. How many trials you must have gone through. Before leaving, Otoka looked around the room again and quietly, so as not to wake the boy, closed the door. A few minutes later, Jun opened his eyes and looked at the ceiling. Many thoughts were going through Jun's mind. He found out that a shinobi had brought him here. This surprised him. His sixth sense told him that they would most likely throw him out, which Jun's mind also agreed with. After sitting in the dark for a few minutes with his eyes open, Jun took a deep breath. A minute later, he fell asleep. Jun stood in a strange place. Again. But this place was different from the last one. Now he was in a large corridor with high ceilings, which was divided into 4 passages. Jun looked around. Not noticing the man who tried to kill him last time, he took a step. Splash! Jun heard water. The boy looked down at his feet and was surprised. He was standing up to his feet in water. He hadn't noticed it before. He kicked the water. There was another splash in the hallway. Jun sighed, closed his eyes and concentrated. After a few minutes, his sixth sense told Jun which direction to go. And he walked in that direction, ignoring the water. After a while, he entered a large room. The ceiling was so high that all that was visible above was darkness. After walking a few meters, Jun felt a current of water. He became interested and followed the current. About 10 minutes later, he approached some kind of dungeon. The sound of flowing water could be heard from this dungeon. The lattice door of the dungeon, which was many times larger than Jun, was lying nearby. It felt like the bars had been torn out not from the inside, but from the outside. The current led into the darkness of the dungeon. Approaching the passage, Jun began to peer into the darkness. After a few seconds, his vision began to adjust and he recoiled. There was a hole behind the dungeon doors. A huge, dark hole. This is where the water was flowing. Jun did not understand who could have left such a hole, but he no longer wanted to meet the previous owner of this dungeon. Suddenly the water, which had been clear before, began to turn red. In the silence of this place, a melody began to be heard. Tilly tilly bomb, someone sang quietly. The night bird is screaming. Drip drip drip. Along with this the sound of dripping water was heard. Jun recognized the sound. He had heard it before. Taking a few steps back, Jun looked into the depths of the dungeon, because that was where the sounds were coming from. A second later, a silhouette of a man appeared from the darkness. He was floating in the air. After walking through the entire hole, the silhouette landed on the edge and looked at Jun. The man's red eye was shining with an unnatural light. He took a step towards Jun. Who are you? Jun asked, clenching his fists and watching the stranger closely. The stranger grinned. He sat down on the chair that stood behind him. Wait, what? Jun was surprised. He was absolutely sure that this furniture was not there. After thinking for a while, Jun came up with an interesting idea. Suddenly, a chair appeared behind him and he sat down in it. Who are you? Jun repeated the question, sitting on the chair and crossing his fingers. The stranger chuckled. He smiled madly and said, I'm your brother. Commentary on Part 5 Emptiness, Sweet Emptiness and LT, underscore, and GT, underscore and LT winking face carrot. P.S. Wild Dancing. Part 6 and Who Are You? Comment to Part 6 and Who Are You? Thanks for 23 likes smiley face. I apologize for the long absence. I'm struggling with this habit. Thanks to user Michael_Solo, for finding a huge number of errors and helping with creating chapter titles, chapters 3 and 4. Thanks to him, I was finally able to finish this chapter. Just inspired me to continue writing. Most of the chapter was written about 1 month ago. Enjoy reading, dear readers. I look forward to your error messages. I reread the chapter 5 times, but maybe I left plot errors and misunderstandings somewhere. Right, I'll look and maybe change something. The stranger chuckled. He smiled madly and said, I'm your brother. Jun answered after a few seconds of silence. Are you kidding? You think I'll believe that? Really? What don't you like about my answer? The stranger answered, smiling with all his 32 teeth. In my opinion, it's a worthy answer. It explains everything. Do you understand that I won't believe this? Tisk. The stranger rolled his eyes. You don't like everything. You look more like a demon. And what kind of demon do you think I am? The stranger asked, clasping his fingers and leaning back, relaxing in his chair. Well, I don't know, one of them. Do I look similar? Mononoke. Yurei. I myself have no idea who I am. But you can consider me simply a spirit. Let's say. So, who are you? The stranger sighed and rolled his eyes. You want to know who I am so much? Well, you can't accept my last answer. Really? Why are you so, I don't know, interested? Did you mean meticulous? Jun asked, raising an eyebrow. After this phrase, the stranger looked at Jun with a look full of condemnation. From such an unexpected turn, Jun's eye began to twitch. This man was starting to irritate him. You can. Okay, I'll tell you everything. But first you have to do one thing. He said, raising his index finger. Listen to yourself, or rather to your intuition. What the? You will understand, he said, clicking his fingers. Now listen to yourself and tell me if I'm telling the truth. Ready? Jun nodded slowly. The stranger took a deep breath, exhaled. He tilted his head slightly to the side and slowly, as if savoring each word, said, I, a girl, after which he smiled. An awkward pause. Jun was silent for a few moments, digesting what he had heard. After a short period of brain work, he looked at the stranger, grimaced and shouted loudly. What are you saying? What nonsense? Do you think I'll believe this? You're so stupid, Jun, the stranger said, tapping his fingers on the armrest of the sofa, beating out some simple melody. Okay, let me clear up one interesting fact for you. Do you know where we are, June? No, the child answered, frowning and looking around. It seems to me that this is some kind of spirit world. And that's not the right answer, my young friend. And not even close to the truth. The stranger answered him cheerfully. But you can be forgiven for not knowing. You're still a small shinobi larva. Knowing nothing, not being able to do anything. You were supposed to go to the academy only in a couple of years, although in our educational institution, if my memory serves me right, they won't say anything about this place. For example, I learned fully about our current location only with the help of the Yamanaka clan. They voluntarily. Come on, hurry up. I don't want to listen to your verbal. Oh, how offensive. I haven't talked to people for so many years and you talk to me like that. And without respect. And I, by the way, am older than you. But I'll take your wish into consideration and tell you frankly. The stranger cracked his neck, straightened his legs and, after sitting more comfortably in the chair, continued. This place is called the halls, the temple of thoughts, or, simply put, it is the inner world of a person. Usually, non-shinobi or shinobi get the opportunity to penetrate their inner world after many years of meditation and self-knowledge. Well, or thanks to some techniques with which you can also penetrate the mind of another person. But we are talking about something else now. Wait, what am I doing here? I haven't meditated and I don't know any special techniques. Jung was surprised. Oh, now that's an interesting point. Yes, you didn't have the technique and didn't meditate, but you were a Jinchuriki. And they get the ability to enter their inner world immediately after sealing the biju. Don't ask how or why. I don't know myself and I don't even have a theory. Jinchuriki. Who? Oh, right, you don't know. How stressful it is to tell. Tell me, June shouted, jumping up from his chair. Hush, you, the stranger said, massaging his temples. Jinchuriki are those who have biju sealed into them, monsters made of chakra. They are also called great-tailed beasts. There are only 9 of them, although there is a 10th. Jun didn't answer, looking at the stranger with surprise. By the way, on your birthday one of them attacked. Demon Fox. Yes, it is he. By the way, he was the one sealed inside you. What? I had the one who attacked Konoha inside me. Wait, that's why I was treated like a monster. Yeah, although I don't know how they found out, after all it's top secret information, but I'll tell you one thing, everything secret eventually becomes clear. Although in your case the information was only partially leaked, because no one ever found out that you were the son of the 4th Hokage, Minato Namikaze. Jun's eyes widened and he looked at the stranger with even greater surprise. The stranger, in turn, was casually tapping out a melody with his fingers. Noticing Jun's surprise, he smiled and winked at him. Didn't expect such a plot twist, he said, folding his palms. I was surprised myself when I found out, but forgive me, it's not important now. Let's get back to where we were. Agreed. Yes. Okay, so, we are in your inner world, so, here, to put it simply, you are a very significant figure. If you want, you can create an illusory world for yourself here and live in it. Although after a while you will lose touch with reality and will forever remain locked in a world of illusions. What? Don't interrupt. The stranger shut up Jun. So, being the owner of your inner world, you have a number of abilities in it. One of which is the ability to distinguish truth from lies. A lie detector in general, you are here. Don't ask how they found out about this effect, I don't know myself. Wait, Jun continued after a minute of silence. I heard that the Yamanaka clan is a clan of specialists in the field of mind manipulation. How do they do it then? Now, my dear friend, this is a difficult question. I haven't delved into the details of their techniques, but if I remember correctly what I was told. The stranger stroked his chin. The Yamanaka seemed to somehow deceive the target's consciousness, causing the detector effect to act on the target itself. They prevent the consciousness from stabilizing and expelling the user, and they also deceive their senses. Although in that case, how do the techniques work in which they cause pain to the targets? Although they cause them pain, and pain, as we know, interferes with concentration. Or am I completely confused and they had a different method? I see, said June, so I can tell when you're lying. Oh, you're a quick thinker. You catch on quickly. Why should I believe you? How do I know you're not deceiving me now? What did you say? They prevent consciousness from stabilizing and expelling the user, and they also deceive his feelings. No way, the man smiled. But I'll tell you one thing. If I could, I would have already taken over your body and run around the real world. For a while they were both silent. Jun sat motionless and thought about something. The man in front of him sat relaxed. It seemed that he was not interested in anything around him. Suddenly Jun clapped his hands, which attracted attention. The stranger looked at him and raised an eyebrow. I believe you. Okay, so let's do it again. Listen to yourself. I have already. It took the stranger a second to realize what Jun had. He smiled and looked at the boy cheerfully, waving his arms. But what? He deceived me, and I fell for it. And you're smarter than you seem. Jun Namikaze. Well, if that's the case, are you ready to hear my story? Call me Jun Fuko. And yes, you lied now too. Jun looked at the stranger's face. The stranger, as if he had not heard the child's last words, continued to sit with a smile on his face and looked at Jun expectantly. He knew what his interlocutor would say next. I want to hear your story and understand how you can be my brother. Okay, but know that even I myself wouldn't have believed it. The stranger's life was similar to Jun's. A childhood in an orphanage and abuse from some of the teachers and children. Neglect from adults. Fear, misunderstanding, loneliness. But the main difference between the lives was that the stranger lived to enter the academy, where, albeit with difficulty, he was able to enter. It was at this moment that Jun learned the stranger's name. His name was Naruto Uzumaki. Life after entering the academy became a little better. Naruto got an apartment and was able to live not in a common room with people who did harm to him. The teachers at the academy treated Naruto more reservedly, even rather neutrally, although sometimes Naruto caught hostile glances from adults. At first, Naruto was still alone at the academy, no one wanted to talk to him, but over time, he was able to find a couple of kids with whom he had at least some friendly relations. One of them was Shikamaru Nara. He was a rather lazy child who loved to sleep. He slept wherever he could, even during classes. Because of this, they tried to reproach him, but the teachers did not succeed. Shikamaru was a genius, lazy, but a genius. He could always answer any tricky questions that were asked of him. It is not clear how, but Naruto and Shikamaru first became good acquaintances, and then after a while they could already call each other friends. During their training, the two of them did a lot of fun things. They painted the Hokage's faces a couple of times, broke a few windows, and a lot of other stuff that Naruto himself didn't want to talk about. Naruto himself was surprised why he wasn't kicked out of the academy for his sabotage, but apparently it was more profitable for the village leadership if their Jinchuriki had a minimum education. Naruto's story sped up. He quickly told about several years of his life. About Team 7, their mentor, about his teammates, Sasuke and Sakura. The moment he spoke about Sasuke, sadness appeared on his face. He spoke of him as a friend, who once took a different path than the one Naruto himself chose, but at that time he believed that his path was the right one and he could convince Sasuke. The story sped up even more. Naruto told about many events that happened around him. He told about his first mission, where he and his team accompanied an architect and where they were attacked by the missing nin Zabuza. The events Naruto was telling about flew by in Jun's imagination at an incredible speed. Naruto turned out to be a good storyteller. It was as if the child himself was a participant in those events. After some time, Naruto came to an event he called the Fourth Shinobi World War. He said that many hidden villages united to defeat a common enemy. Naruto did not say what kind of enemy it was, claiming that they were not a threat to Jun. According to him, Jun was outside their sphere of interest. Then he started talking about his life after the war, but Jun stopped him. Wait, what happened to your friends? The war was cruel. Many shinobi died. Among them was one of my friends. Neji Hyuga. He died protecting someone dear to him. You know, we didn't get along very well, but after a while, I think he cared about me. Although his care was special. He was silent for a while. Jun continued to wait for him to continue. His eyes were shining with interest. Naruto's story was fascinating, incredible, and damn believable. Seeing the child's reaction, Naruto covered his mouth with his hand and smiled ominously. After the war, I lost another friend. Sasuke died. He died because of me. We couldn't resolve our dispute and fought. I miscalculated my strength and killed him. If it weren't for my friend's help, I probably would have killed myself. Were you that worried? Ha, you have no idea how. But we've gotten off topic. I'll continue. He continued his story. After the war, life in the world became calm. No one was eager to fight. After such bloodshed, Everyone was exhausted and concluded non-aggression pacts and even new alliances. Life went on as usual. Naruto got what he always dreamed of. Recognition. In his village, he was praised. Called hero. Naruto was happy about it. After a while, another dream of his came true. He became Hokage. The top of the top. The strongest warrior in the village. Soon after this event, he married Hinata Hyuga. After 15 years, Naruto already had 5 children. He is the pride of the village, the strongest shinobi of the generation. The guarantor of peace. But by that time, he was tired. He began to wish for a simple life. He wanted to resign, but everyone dissuaded him, including his wife. She insisted that they should wait, find a worthy successor. And Naruto listened to her. Unfortunately, the village was attacked by enemies. And in the battle with them, Naruto died. You know, Jun, I was ready to die. In recent years, my health had deteriorated. Unnoticed, slowly, but I began to die. I did not know the exact reason why I was dying. I believed that because of my active youth and the wounds I received at that time, I was slowly fading away. I did not tell anyone about it. Even my wife did not know about it. I did not want to upset them. So I sacrificed myself with a calm soul. I wanted to die with dignity, protecting my people, my village. Naruto smiled weakly and stood up from his chair. He walked past Jun, who was sitting in the chair. You know, some say that before you die, you remember your whole life. But I will say that after death, you remember your life. I lived for my village, honored the will of fire, followed my path as a shinobi. I gave my life so that in the end. Suddenly Naruto was standing in front of Jun, looming over him. He had a menacing aura about him. He looked at the child with his single red eye, full of anger and madness. To find out that I was used. I was a toy. Ah ha ha. Naruto laughed madly, moving away from Jun again and sitting back in the chair. After death, the veil fell from me. I realized that I was a toy. I realized that I was used all the time. All my life, I heard voices in my head. They told me what to do. And you heard them, but you were lucky, because you lived with them for such a short time, and I lived my whole life. What does that mean? Jun asked, swallowing. That's what it means. I died and the chains that held me fell off. I don't understand. Jinchuriki. This is an incredible weapon of the village. A weapon that is capable of both destroying the enemy and destroying its allies. It needs to be monitored. 24/7 monitoring. But how to achieve this? Surveillance. Too risky and expensive. Create a connection with the village and other people in the village. That's better. What if we make it even better? Use knowledge of psychology, specific techniques, drugs. What if we surround the Jinchuriki with enemies, and then let people into his circle who will become friends, acquaintances, or even future partners? What if we use mental techniques and partially model his consciousness, directing it along the right path? What if we use drugs to reinforce the effect of these techniques? Oh, in such a case, we get obedient Jinchuriki, who follow the path that was chosen for them, who will be ready to go to hell for the glory of the village. Who will be ready to die for the village. That is, my whole life was partially determined. If it weren't for some events, I would have become a wonderful puppet in the hands of the village elders. But, unfortunately, it is impossible to foresee everything. The death of some people spoiled everything. It was not possible to make me completely subjugated. An important cog in this plan died, and without it, full control is impossible. I became more free, but predictable. The years spent under control made themselves felt. How did you find out about all this? Oh, part of my memories were sealed, but after death the seal fell. Although it took time for me to realize this knowledge. The mental techniques that were hung on me did not allow me to think normally, but I was able to destroy them, albeit with partial damage to myself. After all, tearing your mind, removing what has taken root in you, penetrated everywhere, is incredibly painful. Terrible. Yes, it's terrible. And you would have had the same fate, maybe a little different, but the path would have been approximately the same. But an accident changed everything. Did you know that after the extraction of the tailed one, no one survives? More precisely, the chance of survival is very small. But how could I survive? Oh, my dear brother, I helped you here. Sometime after my death, I entered you, your tiny body. And for many years I lived in you, being in this damp prison. I saw nothing, only heard echoes of your life. And to my great regret, I could not change anything. I was a prisoner. But I digress. At the moment when Kurama was extracted from you, by the way, that place where he was imprisoned. Naruto pointed behind him to the cage, inside of which there was that huge hole. In short, At that moment I was able to tear out a small part of Kurama's flesh. Oh my, how difficult. Kurama is a demon fox. He is a monster made of chakra. By tearing out his flesh, I stole his chakra. So, I filled your channels with it. It has incredible strength and power and instantly healed you. So, if you had sores, bruises, wounds or other diseases, you are now completely cured. Congratulations. After hearing this, Jun was silent for a while, thinking about everything he had heard. Naruto's story was hard to believe. Many thoughts were running through Jun's head. He was thinking about everything he had heard. You didn't say why you are my brother, said Jun. Are you serious? Ah, Naruto sighed. You look a lot like me, just a different hair color. You lived in an orphanage, not knowing who your parents were. You're a Jinchuriki. We're similar by all criteria. Also, after I entered your body, I heard echoes of Kushina and Minato's voices. You're in my parents. So the facts are obvious. I don't understand. How can so many different worlds exist? I don't know myself, and I'm not interested. Maybe I didn't even move to another world, but just ended up in the past. But no one can answer this question. And you're not even interested. It doesn't matter to me. I'm not a scientist who wants to find an explanation for everything. I'm a killer, and right now I have a goal. You thirst for revenge, Jun said, looking into Naruto's eyes, in which echoes of madness were still visible. Yes, you are right, my young brother. I want revenge. To all those people who used me. To all those who touched my mind and changed it. I want to kill them, to destroy everything that is dear to them. It was this desire that kept me from going crazy here. Is revenge worth it? Oh, yes, it's worth it. You just don't understand yet. You haven't seen what I've seen. You haven't felt what I've felt. My stories have made things clear to you, but they can't show everything that happened. Then I don't understand why you wanted to kill me. Why? You could have just talked to me, told me the story from the beginning. Jun, Naruto said quietly. I've been in this place for about 6 years. Alone. Without communication. In this damp, wretched, disgusting place. I really wanted to get out of here as soon as possible. To feel the breath of the wind, the firmness of the earth. I would like to feel the taste of food again, Jun. So I hurried, forgetting that I was an uninvited guest here, that I had no rights. So you repent? Of course not. Why should I? I saved you. I did. So you owe me. Crazy bastard. Many years of loneliness are taking their toll. Suddenly everything around shook and began to distort. In surprise, Jun jumped up in his chair and began to look around. What the? It's time to wake up. What? Time's up. You're being woken up. A distant, distorted voice sounded. It was possible to make out only a few words. It's time to get up. Listen, that child who was next to me when they pulled the tailed one out of me. That. If he had yellow hair and looked like you in the face, then he was most likely a smaller version of me. And that means that in this world there were 2 Uzumaki children. And in my world there was only one, me. If you believe the documents, of course. I see. Jun paused for a second, then gathered his strength and said, I don't want to help you in your revenge. I want to live a life, a happy life. I see, Naruto said calmly. And you won't do anything. You won't get angry. Jun, our world is terrible and cruel. I know it much better than you. So, after a while, you yourself will come to me, asking to take your body. This will not happen. It will be, Jun, it will be. I know it. That's why I'll wait. I have to wait. After all, as the wise men say, revenge is a dish that is usually served cold. But I want to make a deal with you. What agreement? You will do something for me, and for that I will not terrorize you at night. What? I can't kill you, Jun, but I can still ruin your life. Don't be afraid, what I ask will be beneficial to both you and me. We'll both benefit. And what is the condition? Jun wanted to clarify the terms of the agreement, but suddenly he began to evaporate from this place. The last thing he heard was, meet me next night. Think about my offer. We'll both be on the plus side, brother. Comment to part 6, and who are you? 1280x720 in quality 95 and sign 4A679D5F0F1D927798774F101 February 0 add 30 in type album. Let's pretend this is June. Yes, Photoshop is bad, but I'm not a master either. I just drew his approximate image. I'm learning this skill. Part 7 Pa Striker How Jun is so stupid. Commentary on Part 7 Pa Striker How Jun is so stupid. Hello everyone. With you is your beloved, not necessarily, Sebastian Baskerville, Sebas. Sorry again for the long absence. I'm trying to write, but more or less a chapter is coming out only in a month. I'll try to write another chapter in about 2 weeks, but I make no promises. The plot should move forward soon and finally get to something more or less interesting, but that's not a fact. It was quiet in the forest. Calm. Nothing disturbed this natural idyll. The rustling of leaves, the quiet murmur of the river, the singing of birds, all this filled the forest. All this filled it with peace. But in all this idyll, at times one could hear a sound that did not fit the forest. This sound was quiet, rare and alien to the forest. The sound of slow, almost imperceptible breathing. If you did not listen, you could not notice it. Suddenly, a rustling sound was heard in the bushes. A moment later, a fox came out. She was beautiful. Her red fur stood out against the forest. How could such an animal have gone unnoticed until now? How could it be stealthy with such fur? No one knows, but the fact remains. The fox was incredibly stealthy. Coming out of the bushes, she stopped and sniffed. Her movements were cautious. She had done this many times. After standing motionless for a few moments, she continued on her way. She went in the direction where the murmuring sound was heard. After a few seconds, she disappeared. The only reminders that this fox had been here were her tracks on the ground. A few minutes later, a rustling sound was heard from the same bushes and a moment later a hare jumped out of there. He pricked up his ears. The hare just stood there, listening. Something was alarming him. There was something alien in the surroundings, but the hare couldn't figure out what it was. Suddenly the hare's instincts roared and he abruptly dashed into the thick of the forest. Hi! A stone hit the place where the hare stood. Tisk! A voice sounded from the top of the treetops. You're not leaving, dinner. The tree's leaves shook and a child jumped out. He had red hair and blue eyes. It was Jun Fuko. It seems your prey is escaping from you, great hunter, a mocking voice sounded. Shut up, Naruto, Jun said as he landed on the ground. Don't piss me off. Oh, you scared me. The ghost leaning against the tree spread his arms. There are no stones, so. I know it myself, Jun said, tearing off a couple of branches from the tree. Continuing to chase the hare, Jun squeezed the beginning of the branch and with a sharp movement ran his fist along it from beginning to end. At that moment, his hand glowed blue. A second later, the twigs that stuck out in the branch flew to the sides and as a result, Jun had a rather sharp branch in his hand, which he threw at the same second. FSIY. These sounds just kill me, but I'm going to write like this. I shouldn't have reread the Ranob. There are sounds like that everywhere. Like, kavya kvya, kzik kzik, etc. A branch whistled past the hare's ear, scraping it a little. Without stopping, Jun again, planed, a new branch and a second later threw it. Accuracy is not your thing, Naruto's sarcastic voice sounded as he flew around Jun. Maybe you should ask the hare for forgiveness. You won't hit it anyway, the element of surprise is. Shut up, Jun growled, throwing the branch again. Jun lay in the clearing, breathing heavily. There wasn't a single tree for about 20 meters around him, only short grass. The test failed, Jun. Naruto appeared in front of the child's face. He was translucent, and behind him you could see the cloudless sky. Can you, get out, you're painting the sky red. In chapter 3 and 5, I wrote that Naruto the ghost glows red in the real world. You're throwing me out, me, your teacher. How can you? Naruto feigned indignation, but still moved a little to the side. But I'm glad that your fast legs skill is well developed. When you see, how a huge bear is running towards you, whether you want it or not, you start running faster. I'm glad about that, of course, but if you had developed the skill of always listen to the teacher, then you could have avoided such stress. After all, when I yell at you, run, there's a bear, you need to listen. Am I right, Jun? Yes, Jun said, getting to his feet. You were right, I should have listened to you, but I almost caught the hare. You almost got hit on the head by a bear paw, idiot. But he didn't catch it. The fact that you tripped and flew between the bear's legs, and then, realizing the danger, ran away at the speed of the wind without using chakra, is incredible luck. Rejoice in this good fortune. I am glad. Maybe you can teach me later, for example, when we return home. The likelihood that you will find yourself in a similar situation again is extremely high. If I do something so stupid again, you can ruin my dreams for a week. Well, since you insist, I'll hold off on my desire to teach you until we return to your abode, Naruto said, smiling widely. Despot. What? Nothing. Exactly. Nothing useful comes out of your mouth. Yeah, Jun said, closing his eyes. After a few seconds, his breathing slowed down and he slowly began to fall asleep. If you are attacked, we will both die, but it's good that Jun fell asleep without listening to the end. So these are your conditions? Jun said, sitting at a table in some restaurant. Yeah, Naruto said, taking a piece of fried meat from the table and biting off a large piece. Watching this, Jun massaged his eyes and when he looked back at Naruto, he saw him pick up a large glass and drink from it. Jun sighed and turned his attention to the surroundings. Jun and Naruto were in some strange restaurant. There were many tables with many people sitting at them, eating strange dishes that Jun had never seen before. Waiter, Naruto called out as he looked up from eating his meat. Yes, a man dressed in black pants, a white shirt and a tie materialized next to them. Anything else? Please bring me triple big testy McChicken Premier Spicy. Immediately. An excellent choice, the waiter said, and the next moment a strange dish appeared on the table in front of Naruto. I don't even want to know what this is, Jun said, looking warily at this thing that was twice as big as his head. This dish consisted of bread, tomatoes, cucumbers, cheese and meat with some other ingredients that Jun didn't know about. But I have a question, do you need to eat? Naturally not. And why are you eating? Because I can. What's the point? There is none. It's just delicious. You don't understand anything. Ah, you're driving me crazy. Jun massaged his temples. Right, I got distracted. Those conditions you said, can you repeat them? Naruto snapped his fingers and a long scroll appeared next to Jun. The beginning of the scroll fell on the edge of the table and the end fell to the floor with a dull thud. Jun looked at the scroll, then at Naruto, who continued eating his meal. He then closed his eyes, sighed, and massaged his eyes. You're so annoying, Jun said, taking the scroll in his hands and reading it. Can I have normal conditions? What don't you like about these? Everything is perfect. Free donation of the body, free donation of the body, donation of the body in favor of a more senior colleague. Jun read the first points. And, the last point, number 178. Really? You, a normal contract. Quick. I definitely won't agree to that. Ah, how ungrateful you are. A second later, the scroll shrank several times. There were about 20 points left in it. Seems more or less, Jun whispered, reading carefully. Take care of the body. Listen to Naruto when he says something important. So, learn shinobi skills. Yes. Why should I learn to kill and learn to kill? The way of the shinobi does not mean only killing. It is also the work of a bodyguard, in which one must kill. A teacher, but to be one must kill. A mercenary, which must kill. The way of shinobi is not only about killing. There are many things in it that can save. Healing techniques, barriers, seals and much more. Moreover, I am not going to teach you to kill. I am going to teach you to survive. And why? Of course, you should survive. If you die, I will die too. Do you think I want that? There is definitely no death of your own, but mine is possible. These are unnecessary details. They are important to me. Think faster. I won't wait long. Having read the list of points again and made sure that there were no double meanings, Jun answered. I agree with the points. Where should I sign? Fa ha. Naruto laughed loudly. That's hilarious. To sign. Ah ha ha. Why are you laughing? Jun. Phew. This agreement is nothing more than an immaterial sheet. I wrote it for you so that you would know the conditions. There is no way we can conclude it in writing. Only orally. So it is more of an agreement than a contract. And what was the point then? It annoys you. In principle, I agree with your conditions. But I'm confused. I really don't want you to die, Jun. If you think I want to kill you in such an original way, then you know what to do. That's the point, you've never lied. Suspicious. Don't be so suspicious, Jun. Yes, our first meeting was not very nice. I tried to kill you. Yes, I repent for the umpteenth time. But understand, being locked up here alone was unbearable and I couldn't control myself. I showed aggression towards you. Yes, unjustified, but tell me, what would you or another person have done in my place? I sat in isolation for several years. Alone with my thoughts, my nightmares and fears. I thought about a lot, realized. In many ways, I changed my mind. There is little left in me from the former Naruto Uzumaki. I became different. More cruel. More terrible. Ah, I find it hard to imagine. And I'm not asking this of you. I just want to convey one thought to you. Our first meeting was terrible, that's a fact, but now I'm not your enemy. Your death is my death. Your life is important to me. So, June, I will do everything possible for you to live. And if your prediction doesn't come true, what if I don't come to you to give you my body? Well, Naruto sighed sadly. In that case, my point of view about our world is wrong. So I will be glad if you live your life happily. Find a wife and have children. I will be happy for you. And no resentment. You won't hate me for not being able to take revenge. I don't believe it. Jun, Naruto shook his head. I have no reason to hate you. There is no point in it, and as for the fact that I will not be able to take revenge, that would mean that fate is not in my favor. I can only shrug my shoulders at that. Jun thought. During this entire conversation, Naruto had never lied. Jun didn't feel any falsehood. Naruto was speaking sincerely. Jun's life was important to Naruto. After thinking about the offer for a while, Jun decided that being able to survive could help him. There are many dangers in the world, so getting guidance and training from Naruto, who according to his own stories was strong and experienced, was not a bad argument. Okay, I agree, Jun started to say, raising his head. Suddenly, he shut up and looked at Naruto in horror. What the? They're going to die, Jun. They're going to die, Naruto said in a distorted voice, smiling widely as he began to deform. His limbs lengthened and long claws began to appear on them. Another row of teeth appeared in his mouth, and his fangs became larger and began to drip a liquid similar to blood. Jun was paralyzed with fear. He couldn't move. At the same time, the deformed Naruto began to slowly move towards him, standing on the table. A little boy who never felt love, Naruto said in a terrible voice, approaching. Those people showed you kindness. They saved you, fed you, let you live with them. You were probably surprised, right? The monster continued to speak, incessantly and without stopping. His steps colored everything around him in red tones. Every time he clenched and unclenched his fingers, moved his hand or leg, a terrible sound was heard that resembled the sound of breaking bones. They captured your little heart. Yes, the heart of a boy who felt lonely and cold began to warm up. But they will all die. Just like Shinsetsu, orphanage teacher, died. From your hands, Jun. From yours. Aha. The creature began to laugh, hanging over Jun. Jun couldn't do anything. Fear wouldn't let him go. The memory of how he killed the teacher and several children from the orphanage began to appear in his head. Even greater horror gripped him. Despair filled his mind. The creature kept talking and talking, but Jun didn't understand what it was saying. He was going deeper and deeper into the darkness of his mind, where his deepest thoughts were hidden, where all the fears and suffering he had endured were sealed away. Jun was going deeper and deeper into his memory, reliving his darkest and most terrible days, but this time they were even worse, because everything that happened in them was warped and distorted. And with it, the monster's voice followed him. A voice whose words he couldn't understand, but some of which were imprinted in his mind like an alarm. They will die. They will all die. Opening his eyes in the clearing, Jun tried to come to his senses for some time. A nightmare. It's just a nightmare, Jun thought, exhaling. For a while, Jun just lay there, looking at the darkening sky. It had been several hours since he had run away from the bear that had nearly killed him. He had been sleeping in the clearing all this time, but for some reason he did not feel rested and wanted to continue sleeping. After thinking about it and weighing the pros and cons, Jun decided to move on to his small camp. Jun stood up, leaning on his hands, and looked around. He was still in the clearing, which he had accidentally managed to find. It was good. He would have set up his camp here, if he had had such an opportunity. Are you awake, Jun, Swift Genin? Naruto asked without turning around. Naruto sat with his back to Jun, looking somewhere into the forest. He sat on the ground, in a lotus position, as if he was meditating. Did anything happen while I was sleeping? Jun asked, yawning. A couple of times hares and foxes ran by. That's all. Did you have a nightmare? How did you understand? I am a soul sealed in your body, so I feel a lot. And also you were tossing and turning restlessly and mumbling something in your sleep. I still can't understand how you see everything if you are a prisoner of my body. Yeah, one of many questions. As mysterious as the question of how I can be outside of you, but still be sealed in you. And why I can only be outside with your permission. But we won't know the answers. Probably only Shinigami can answer us, but unfortunately, it seems to me that if he wanted to, he would have already contacted us. Maybe. Well, shall we go? Naruto asked, standing up and turning to Jun. Yes. Jun got up from the clearing and, collecting his things that were lying near him, put them back into his knapsack and, throwing it over his shoulder, he went. Very soon Jun and Naruto went deep into the thicket. Walking on the ground here is incredibly difficult. Everything is overgrown with bushes, thorny grasses and other plants that hinder movement. Jun, Naruto said slowly, glancing at him. I'm tired and I don't want to. So we will have to walk for another 5 hours to our parking lot. To the camp. Yeah, let's say so. Ah, okay, Jun said, walking up to the tree. Finding himself near the tree trunk, Jun looked up. The tree was tall, about 20 meters, but its branches only began to grow at a height of 15 meters and branch out, forming a furry and huge crown. This tree was not alone here. There were many of them. The distance between them was about 5 meters. Because of their proximity, their crowns intertwined together, forming a solid leafy roof that almost did not let in sunlight. It's convenient here. You just need to climb up to the treetops and then you can run along the branches. We'll save a few hours that way. And when you run, small branches will hit your face. A small price to pay for speed and convenience. But not comfort. Living in the forest is not comfortable at all, Jun. I already understood that. Jun exhaled and, closing his eyes, concentrated. A few seconds later, Jun's feet began to glow blue and he, opening his eyes, confidently stepped onto the tree trunk. A second later, he put his second foot on the trunk and, breaking all the laws of physics, did not fall. Exhaling, Jun walked up the trunk, toward the crowns of the tree. A couple of times, during his ascent up the trunk, Jun slid down slightly, accompanying this action with exhalations. At such moments, Naruto, who was flying near him at the time, gave him instructions, but after a couple of times Jun looked at him with an angry look and Naruto fell silent. Ah, Jun exhaled, finding himself on a tree branch. It's still difficult for me for now. But this method speeds up movement. You rest here for a bit. Yeah, if you hadn't told me, I would have run right away. Anything is possible. By the way, there are branches growing quite close here, so it will be much more convenient to run here. Even if you don't use chakra. Great, otherwise I'm afraid I would fall a couple of times. Not impossible, but then you would have excellent practice in grouping when falling. You know, I'm better at falling and jumping than at climbing and climbing. That's why I taught you the grouping first, otherwise I would have broken my neck when I tried to walk along the trunk. Thanks for that. When you said that the skill of falling correctly is one of the most important, I didn't believe you. You are all so young, you don't believe the experiences of the older ones. Read some more to me here. Sitting on a branch, dangling his legs and looking at the ground, Jun remembered how he had recently tried to hit a hare with a stone. He had been sitting in ambush for half an hour on a branch that was 10 meters above the ground. During this time, he had seen a couple of passing moose, which he had decided not to touch, because even if he had killed them, he would not have been able to carry away the carcass no matter how hard he tried. He had also seen a beautiful fox, which he felt sorry for, but the hare seemed like a good catch to him. The hare turned out to be an incredible catch, so that even Jun could not catch it. After a while, Jun stood up and walked along the branches towards his camp, which, according to his calculations, was to the west. During his little journey, Jun replayed the events of the last few days. He asked Otak for permission to go out into the forest for a few days, assuring him that everything would be fine and that he would bring berries, mushrooms and possibly fresh meat with him. Otak laughed at what he heard and, after thinking for a bit, allowed Jun to leave, on the condition that after that they would go fishing together. Remembering this brought a smile to Jun's face. Jun wasn't very fond of fish, for some reason he couldn't stand the sight of them, but the act of fishing itself wasn't repulsive, so he agreed with Otoka that they would eat the raw, wet, slimy fish, themselves, as the child put it. What are you smiling about? Naruto asked, appearing in front of Jun. Well, I just remembered that there is a place with a huge amount of mushrooms and berries not far from the camp. So I can pick them there so I don't return home empty-handed. Okay, that's very good, Naruto said slowly, looking at Jun with an expression on his face as if he had caught him doing something indecent. Hey, what a face. No, there's no face, Naruto said, pursing his lips and laughing nastily. Hee hee. You're annoying, Naruto. After a while, Jun jumped off the branches and, after walking a few more meters, came out of the bushes, finding himself at the road. After looking around, Jun crossed to the other side. I ended up in the wrong place. If my memory serves me right, I can get home pretty quickly by going down this road. What do you think, Naruto? Naruto didn't answer, staring at the road. Naruto. Jun approached Naruto, glancing at the road, but didn't notice anything there. Hey, did something happen? Oh, no, nothing. Naruto said, turning to Jun. By the way, remind me, what's the date today? Today. It seems to be Friday 13th of Shigatsu. Shigatsu April. I couldn't find any calendar in Naruto. So I looked on the Japanese wiki. Their calendar is similar to ours, so I just changed the name of the month and that's it. If anyone knows, send me a link to a calendar or something similar for Naruto. Wow, how quickly time flies. Why do you need it? I wanted to know what day it is. Should there be a reason for that? For you, yes. I'm afraid that I might lose touch with reality, so I'm counting the days in my head and to check myself I asked you for the date. Mine and yours are the same, so now I'm calm. Oh, sorry. Nothing. Everything is fine, Naruto said. Were you asking about where to go? Yes. I think it's better to go to the camp first. It will be difficult to walk at night. Also, haven't you forgotten that you should bring berries and mushrooms? Oh, I forgot about that. Well, in that case, let's go. Jun said, turning away from Naruto and starting to move towards the bushes opposite the ones he came from. Jun walked a little hopping, trying not to show his joy that he would soon be in a warm room and would be able to see his new parents again. Jun's fatigue disappeared as if by magic. After a bit of hesitation, Naruto also followed Jun. The one-eyed man also had a smile on his face, but he was smiling for a different reason. Naruto was more attentive than Jun, so he was able to notice the tracks on the road. The tracks of about 12 people, who were walking in the direction of the Kazoku family's house. The moment he saw those tracks, a voice he had heard before resounded in his head. A voice that had emotionlessly told him a report that he had only remembered twice in the last 3 years. The first time he remembered it was after hearing the name and surname of the people who had saved Jun, and the second time he remembered it was after seeing those tracks. A bandit gang that had been operating in the Land of Fire for about 23 years was destroyed. Its first known victims were the Kazoku family, who lived in seclusion near the forest. Commentary on Part 7, Pa Strike or How Jun is So Stupid. Hello again. Congratulations on reading this wonderful work to the end of the chapter. I kindly ask you to mark the errors you noticed while reading, and of course ask me questions if you have any. I will say right away that the more comments there are, the more enthusiasm I will get and I will write a sequel. But according to tradition, this is not a fact. Part 8, An Unexpected Twist. Author, could you have come up with something more original? Commentary on Part 8, An Unexpected Twist. Author, could you have come up with something more original? Hope you see this chapter soon, written March 27, 2022. The probability of finding a huge number of errors in the text is 99.9%. I expect error messages. Wow. Yeonjun, climbing out of the hut. What a beautiful morning. It was already daytime. Rays of light were breaking through the treetops, illuminating everything around. Jun's camp was small. Just a hut, a fire, and a shelter made of leaves, moss, and sticks. Under the shelter were several wicker baskets, completely filled with mushrooms and berries, and a knapsack with Jun's things. It's already lunchtime, Naruto said, materializing next to Jun. You spent half the night looking for those mushrooms and berries in vain. You could have just looked for them in the morning. Maybe, Jun said, stretching his back. But I wanted to work before bed. You just couldn't sleep because you were so nervous because we were going back to the house. Naruto said. No, Jun said loudly, blushing. Don't talk nonsense. And your reaction says otherwise. Naruto said slowly, pursing his lips. Hee hee, shy Jun, Tsunere. No, Jun shouted, stamping his foot. Are you doing this on purpose? Really? Don't make fun of me. Naruto started laughing openly while Jun stamped his foot and waved his arms. After a few minutes of trying to keep Naruto quiet, Jun waved and went to pack his things with a slightly red face. After a while, after Jun checked his things, he threw the knapsack over his shoulder and, taking a basket in each hand, walked to the edge of the clearing. Although the place where Jun's camp was located was difficult to call a clearing. The camp was located on a plot of land about 10 by 10 meters in size. There were mainly short blades of grass and, near the border with a dense forest, bushes. What was interesting here was that the clearing was located between 4 trees whose crowns were intertwined. The light was weakly shining through the crown, but it was enough to make everything here perfectly visible. Should we remove the hut? Naruto asked, finding himself in front of Jun. Why, let it be here, Jun said, shrugging his shoulders. Maybe we'll get together to train somewhere in this place again. Why remove it if we can leave it? Do you think he'll survive this time? He'll last a week at most. Well, Jun began, thinking, maybe you're right, but in that case, why should I clean it up? Take it with me. Sticks, leaves, and moss. I can find them anywhere. Wow, you're learning, student. You didn't fall into my trap. Apparently you have logic. I'm glad. You're starting again. While chatting casually, Jun and Naruto left the clearing, leaving behind a hut and a canopy. Jun was happily skipping through the forest, humming a light tune to himself. Naruto was hovering nearby. Jun walked happily, not caring if he could be heard. Who could be in this forest? Jun and Naruto were in the forest, which was quite close to the Kazoku family's house. They had to walk several dozen meters to get to the path that led to the house. This path started at the road and went about 100 meters through the forest. It was easy to spot. Usually, when Jun went somewhere in the forest, he would first go to the road and then walk for about 20 minutes along the path. Jun liked to walk exactly this way. This path calmed him. He could hear birds singing, crickets chirping, the distant howl of wolves. All these sounds brought him peace. Caw-caw, the crows croaked loudly in the distance. The sharp sound made Jun stumble and almost fall, but he managed to grab onto a branch. The cawing of the crow made Jun remember the time when he lived in the orphanage. His only entertainment back then was feeding the crows that were constantly circling around him, as if they were expecting something. I haven't seen ravens for a long time. They don't come to these forests often. That's weird, Naruto said, cracking his wrist. Caw-caw. Caw-caw. Many crows in the distance sang their song, understandable only to them. Wow, that's a familiar tune, Naruto said. Melody. Jun didn't understand. You'll be surprised, Jun, but crows are quite interesting creatures. You could say that they are quite smart and somewhat similar to people. And what does melody have to do with it? Well, crows are solitary, but when they find a dead carcass, they start singing. For people, their singing is terrible, frightening and disgusting, but to me it seems interesting and exciting. You have strange preferences, Jun said, then stopped abruptly. Stop. Did you say dead carcass? Well, yes. Crows are scavengers, I think. There are always a lot of them near battlefields where there are a lot of corpses. So maybe we can find the carcass of some animal in the direction where the crows are screaming. Yes. Most likely yes. Let's run. Maybe we'll still have time to grab something. Having said this, Jun turned towards the sound with incredible speed and ran along the path. A few minutes later, Jun ran out of the forest and found himself on the road. Along the edges of the road grew tall trees, the crowns of which almost did not let in light. When Jun ran out of the shadow of the trees, he was blinded for a second by the bright daylight. Caw-caw, the crows cawed loudly, surrounding something on the road. Shoo, shoo, Jun shouted, waving his arms, trying to scare away the crows. Now fly away. The crows suddenly flapped their wings in unison and flew away. Only their feathers remained as a reminder that they had been there. The crows took off, leaving behind a column of dust that hid what the crows were surrounding. So, what do we have here? Said Jun, trying to pick up what was in the dust table. Something cold, sticky and... Turning his head, Jun noticed that Naruto was staring at something on the ground without moving. Looking in the same direction, Jun noticed that there was some strange red broken line on the ground, the beginning of which was visible only at the edge of the forest. Jun didn't notice the line at first, concentrating all his attention on the crows. It's blood, Jun suddenly realized. The red line he saw was blood. It felt like someone was pulling something that was bleeding. Bird claw marks could be seen near the bloody trail. What is this? Jun began, turning his head back. Now that the dust had settled, it was possible to see the thing that had been hidden. Jun threw away what he was holding with a scream. The object turned out to be a human hand. The hand was completely covered in blood. On the wrist of the hand was a wooden bracelet. Jun screamed, then vomited. What? Human hand. MHG. I see. June. I have bad news. What news could be worse than the fact that a hand is lying here? The news is whose hand it is. Take a closer look. Through horror and disgust, Jun approached the hand and, with trembling hands, wiped a little blood from the bracelet. The next moment, even greater horror gripped him. It can't be. Jun began to speak, not believing what he saw. It can't be. The bracelet was familiar to Jun. It was the bracelet of Otoka, the man who had taken Jun in. But what was he doing here? Where was Otoka? Had he been attacked by an animal that had injured him? Dozens of thoughts appeared in Jun's head and instantly disappeared, giving way to even more terrible thoughts. I have to run home. I have to. Jun. Naruto drew attention to himself. Traces. Naruto pointed in the direction of the forest where the blood trail started. Jun nodded uncertainly and ran towards it. Naruto flew after him. Jun ran through the forest for a few minutes, following the almost invisible trail of blood. During this time, he said nothing to Naruto. He was silent the entire time. After a few minutes of this sprint, when Jun was already starting to run out of breath, he smelled a sharp odor. It was the smell of blood. Jun had smelled it before, when he caught and killed hares during successful hunts, but this time the smell made him want to vomit. Jun stopped and sniffed the foul odor, roughly pinpointing where it was coming from. Jun turned his head to Naruto, who responded by placing his ghostly hand on the child's shoulder and nodding. Jun nodded back and swallowed, moving on. With each step the smell became stronger and stronger, and Jun became worse. Approaching the tree near which the stench was strongest, Jun sighed and walked around it. Jun had previously hoped that he had imagined it and that the bracelet did not belong to Otoka, but upon seeing the body, he instantly despaired. Otoka was lying leaning against a tree. He was covered in blood. There were terrible wounds all over his body. His right hand, on which he wore the bracelet, was cut off, and in his left hand there was some kind of cloth. Otoka's gaze was glassy and directed somewhere into the sky. A tired smile was frozen on his face. It seemed that he was simply floating in the clouds and would soon wake up, smile at Jun, calm him down, dispel his fears. But this could not happen. Otoka was dead. It was his corpse. Cold, covered in blood. The corpse of a man who, in such a short time, managed to become Jun's friend, mentor, father. This realization hit Jun hard. No. Jun began to speak, falling to the ground. Tears began to flow. It can't be. Why? No. Ah. Out of desperation, Jun began to beat his fists on the ground and scream. He screamed so loudly that it seemed Naruto's ears began to hurt, although this was impossible. Jun's eyes were burning from tears. Why? Why him? Jun screamed, raising his tear-stained eyes to the heavens as if asking them. Why does everyone who becomes dear to me die? Why? Jun. Naruto appeared next to Jun and hugged him. Calm down. I can't. They killed Otoko. Who could have done something like that? Jun pushed Naruto away, breaking into a scream, and then turned his gaze back to Otoko. Tears began to form in his eyes again, but his gaze caught on the cloth Otoko was holding in his left hand. What is this? Approaching Otoka, Jun slowly and carefully opened his palm and took the piece of cloth in his hands. At the moment of this action, Jun felt the urge to vomit, but he endured them, and after taking the cloth, he turned away and walked away from Otoka's body. In his hand, Jun held a piece of good quality fabric, which was most likely torn from clothing. On this fabric, some kind of embroidered sign was visible. A circle, inside which were a crossed sickle and axe. What could this mean? Jun said quietly, squeezing his hand tightly. Most likely a gang of bandits, Jun, Naruto said quietly, appearing behind Jun's shoulder. You think so? Jun said, shrugging his shoulder, behind which Naruto appeared. Otoka's gold ring, which he wore without taking off, was taken away. I see, Jun said, lowering his head and looking at the fabric again. Don't cry, Jun. You can't help the dead with tears. I'm sure of it. Naruto, did you feel the same when your friend died? No, I felt even worse. After all, I was to blame for his death. Jun stood there, wondering what to do. He hoped that the bandits hadn't found the house and hurt Jose. He really wanted to believe that. We need to take the body. Naruto didn't answer Jun, but he didn't need an answer. Jun had already decided everything. In complete silence, Jun walked over to Otoka's body and picked it up. It took him a few minutes to hoist it onto his back. Ah, ha, exhaling, Jun raised his head and walked towards the house. Naruto followed Jun's retreating gaze. For a second, the corners of his lips twitched, but he quickly pulled himself together and flew after Jun. How unlucky I am, thought Morigutu, a bandit from the young gang, sickle and axe. Kamata Ono. Morigutu was once a simple farmer, but he had never felt the pleasure of it all his life. So when strange-looking people came to his village and asked him to join them, he agreed without hesitation. He soon proved to those people that he was one of them. Murder, theft, thievery. Mori didn't care. He was willing to do whatever it took to get what he wanted. He wanted riches. Money. That's what he wanted. He believed that only money ruled the world, so he was willing to do anything for money. The leader liked this trait of Mori, so he always took him with him on missions. Everyone thought that this was his worst trait, but it was not so. Mori had several secrets. Secrets that no one knew. And no one will know. After all, everyone who once found out about them died very quickly. Mori loved to keep secrets, but he loved to kill those who knew his secrets even more. But now Mori was on guard. He stood near the door and watched the forest around him with incredible attentiveness. Yes, he was asleep on duty. What else could they do? Their gang of 12 hardened bastards was in a house in the woods. There was no safer place. No one knew about this place. If they hadn't accidentally noticed the owner of this house, they would have passed by. They saw the owner near the road. He was walking somewhere, holding a bouquet of fresh wild flowers in his hands. There was a carefree smile on his face. Our leader, Aku Toi. Aku no too, called out to him. Within a minute, they were talking. Aku spoke to the man for quite a while, and then, unexpectedly even for us, his gang, he took out a sickle, which he had skillfully concealed under his clothes, and attacked the man. Aku cut off the man's arm and grabbed it in midair. The man fell to the ground, clutching the stump, and the leader smiled, brought the severed arm to his face and licked the blood. The man looked at Atu in horror, holding back a scream, and Atu, as if mocking him, hit the man in the face with his own hand, after which he raised his sickle and began to cut the man. Atu dealt only a few blows, after which the man kicked him away and, stumbling, ran off somewhere into the forest. In pursuit of the man, Atu threw his hand. After that, Atu noticed a gold ring, which most likely fell from the hand of the running man, and smiled. But his joy did not last long. A second later, he noticed that a piece of fabric with the symbol of their gang embroidered on it was missing from his clothes. Atu's face twisted and he screamed, cursing the man for daring to ruin his clothes, and promising to take revenge on him when they met. After that, Atu came up to us and told us to clean up the blood that was left on the ground and told us that there was a house nearby where we could stay, but first we needed to find the path that led there. It took us about 10 minutes to find the damn trail. It was discovered by chance by a rather nasty member of our gang named Kawai Sabanto, who everyone simply called Rat because he was small, sneaky, and jealous. Nasty. And so, several hours passed since we arrived at this house. There was only one woman in it, whose fate was not to be envied. How unlucky I am, Mori thought again. A few minutes later, the door of the house opened and a woman flew out. She was covered in bruises and abrasions. She fell to the ground, unable to even stand up. They played with her too much, Mori thought indifferently. Mori. A man dressed in a shirt and loose trousers came out of the same doors. What do you want, Pin? Mori asked lazily, watching the girl's attempts to get up, which always ended with her falling again. Get rid of this madwoman. What's the matter? Are you tired already? Yes, she bit Rat, almost bit off half his finger. You should have heard how he screamed. The soundproofing of this house is amazing. I didn't hear anything from here. We can't hear anything from inside either, that's why you're sitting on the lookout. In short, put her away. Are you absolutely sure? The boss won't mind. No, it won't. It's his order. The rat has gotten on his nerves so much with this incident that he can't stand his squeals anymore. Still so young. Do you feel sorry for her? Do you? No, I'm just too lazy to do it, but since the boss himself asks, that's all my authority here. It's my job to obey the orders of my superiors. By the way, here you go. Having thrown a coin, Pin closed the door behind him. Mori deftly grabbed it in midair, then bit it, testing its hardness. Having made sure, Mori grunted with satisfaction. Any whim, just give me money, said Mori. Getting up from the step, Mori took the small axe that was lying next to him and, putting it between his belt and clothes, approached the girl. The girl was completely beaten, without a single living place. On her cheek you could see a red spot, which was getting bigger and bigger with each passing second. Noticing the movement, the girl raised her head and looked at the man who approached her. Please, the girl said quietly. Let me go. I won't say anything, please. Yes, 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 Mori said, grabbing her hands. You all say that. Please. She began again, but before she could finish she received a blow to the face, after which she passed out. It will be quieter this way. Mori placed the unconscious body on his back and walked into the forest. After about 5 minutes the girl began to move and, noticing this, Mori chuckled. Just in time, he said, throwing her to the ground. The girl fell without making a sound. She didn't even have enough strength for that. She watched helplessly as Mori took out an axe and plunged it into the ground. The girl tried to move, but she only had enough strength to turn over and freeze when she saw the hole. The girl was near a shallow, recently dug hole. Why are you so quick? And I wanted to surprise you. Too bad, said Mori, approaching the girl and taking her by the chin. Do you have anything to say? Please. The girl began, but she was not destined to finish. Sorry lady, but I don't care, Mori said, covering her mouth with his hand. Then he pulled out a hatchet and hit the girl on the head with it. The skull was broken. The girl was dead, another victim of the misogynist maniac. I hate women, said Mori. But I love killing. Looking at the girl's lifeless body, Mori chuckled. He rose from his knees and cracked his head. Ooh, it wasn't for nothing that I dug the hole. Having said this, Mori pushed the girl's body into the hole. She fell with a dull sound. Sobbing. Someone quietly sobbed somewhere in the bushes. There's someone here, thought Mori. I need to lure them out, but how? After thinking for a while, Mori came up with a plan. Yawned Mori. How tired I am. I'll probably start dripping tomorrow. What can happen overnight? After these words, Mori turned and quickly walked away, but not far. He hid in the bushes, waiting. A few minutes later, Mori quietly and slowly emerged from the bushes and headed towards the place where he had left the girl's body. After taking only a few steps, Mori began to hear quiet sobs. Someone was there after all. Mori smiled. Another victim had almost come into his arms. Gripping the axe more comfortably, Mori exhaled quietly and slowly peered out from behind the tree. Near the pit sat a small child, who was hugging the woman's body and crying quietly. Not far from the edge of the forest lay another body. It was the man whose hand the gang leader had chopped off. Wow, what a score, Mori thought, licking his lips. And the man's body was found. And maybe their child is here. How lucky I am. Mori chuckled softly and slowly began to approach the child. The child continued to hug the woman, crying quietly, but suddenly he moved his free right hand along the ground and picked up a small leaf. The next second, some energy passed through the flattery. Mori did not notice this, concentrating his attention entirely on the child's back. The man was almost to the child. Only a few steps left. 1, 2, 3. Mori was at the child. An anticipatory smile was visible on the man's face. He licked his dry lips and said, Boy, what are you doing here? Having said this, Mori tried to grab the child sharply, but something happened that he did not expect. The child turned sharply and waved his hand with something near Mori's neck. Mori recoiled in surprise and stood up. He had not expected such agility from the child. Looking closely at the object the child was holding in his hands, Mori realized that it was just a leaf of a tree. He also noticed that this leaf was covered in something red. Blood, Mori thought, but remembering who the boy was sitting next to, the man thought it was the girl's blood. Well, it's time to play with this little one. A crash. Mori tried to say something, but he couldn't. Pain pierced his throat. Mori grabbed his throat, which was in something warm, and fell to the ground. Removing his hand from his throat and looking at her, Mori was stunned. She was covered in blood. In his blood. Mori was gripped by horror. He did not understand what was happening. He raised his eyes and looked at the child. In front of him stood a short child, about 9 years old, with red hair and eyes that were getting redder and redder with each passing second. What happened? The boy said, taking one step toward Mori. Are you in pain? K-craw. Mori tried to say something, but blood started flowing from his throat. Don't say it, or you'll choke, the child said, then walked up to Mori, grabbed him by the chin, and hit him. I want to thank you. If it weren't for you, Jung would never have given me his body. A terrible, Mad smile appeared on the child's face. He laughed, raising his head to the sky. It's time for my revenge. He said loudly. I will take revenge on all of you. I will destroy you, the bastards who dared to use me. Mori tried to crawl away from the child, but the child, as if expecting this, hit him hard on the knee. A crunching sound was heard. Where are you going? Are you going to leave? No way. As a good owner, I can't just let you go. Saying this, the child grabbed Mori by the neck, from which blood was flowing, and squeezed it. I still need you alive. You know, I have one little theory that I want to test. And you will become my guinea pig, so stand still and don't move. Mori tried to resist, but due to blood loss, he was too weak. The child held Mori with one hand, and with the other he made some signs, after which he touched Mori's head. Psycho Denshin, the child said, after which Mori fell into oblivion. Commentary on Part 8, An Unexpected Twister. Author, could you have come up with something more original? After writing this chapter I feel like a bastard. I wrote almost everything in this chapter on 3/29. I just had a little bit left to write, which I was able to do only on the morning of 3/31. That day was incredibly productive. P.S. The chapter was ready at 10 o'clock today, but it was sent for revision and error finding. Part 9, and What to Do After Receiving the Body. Commentary on Part 9, and What to Do After Receiving the Body. A full attempt to continue writing began on 10.04. I hope you will see the continuation soon. Ps 10.045 pages written. PS 17.04 I continue writing, there was a lot to do, and now there is still a lot to do. Page 4 written PSS 19.04, written on page 2. Sent for review. No, not that, Jun said quietly, holding Jose's lifeless body in his arms. Why? How did this happen? Jun sobbed quietly, squeezing the cold body in his arms tighter and tighter. When he saw the robber killing the woman, he was paralyzed with fear. He could not make a single movement. He could only watch and be horrified by the cruelty of man. Otok's death was a great shock to Jun, but Jose's murder had a much greater impact on the child. He didn't see the man killed, which made it easier for him to cope with his death, but Jose's murder. He saw it in detail, because he was in the bushes at the time. The moment when the woman wanted to say something to the robber, and he simply killed her, hit Jun hard. He involuntarily made a sound, but fortunately, the killer did not notice it. Ah, the man yawned. How tired I am. I'll probably start dripping tomorrow. What can happen overnight? After these words, the man turned and quickly walked into the forest. After waiting for a while, Jun came out of the bushes and, not noticing how Otok's body fell from his back, approached the hole into which Jose was thrown. The woman's head was broken and the light in her eyes was gone forever. It took Jun a little while to get the body out of the hole and wrap his arms around it. He sat there for a long time, holding Jose and crying. Jun didn't care that he could be heard. A few minutes later, the rustling of leaves was heard behind Jun, but the child did not pay attention to it. Completely absorbed in his sadness, he did not pay attention to anything. For him, at that moment, the only thing that mattered was the lifeless body of Jose. Jun, Naruto said loudly, levitating in front of Jun. His voice was worried. Jun, calm down. It's dangerous here. The one who killed Jose is coming towards us. If you don't calm down and pull yourself together, we'll both die. Jun. Jun slowly raised his head and looked at Naruto with tear-stained eyes. Naruto's fears were justified. He could see nothing but indifference in Jun's eyes. The child was not afraid. He had resigned himself. He was ready to die. He wanted to die now, to be reunited with the people he had become dear to. Unfortunately for Naruto, Jun's death was dangerous and could interfere with his plans. Naruto concentrated and used all his mental strength to concentrate. He closed his eyes and opened them a second later, finding himself in the inner world with Jun. Without giving Jun time to realize what had happened, Naruto walked up to the child and punched him with all his might. He flew several meters before falling into the water. Fei. Jun stood up, coughing up water. Why? Why what? Why am I hitting you? Because you're an idiot. We're both going to die because of you. Naruto, breaking into a scream, took a few steps towards Jun. Do you even think with your own head? Do you think that if your guardians died, then you should too? Why should I live if they're dead? Jun said quietly, looking at Naruto. The child's eyes seemed to have dimmed. Looking at Jun, Naruto suddenly became furious. He clenched his fists and made a quick dash towards the child. You. Naruto grabbed Jun by the collar, lifted him up and said with a grimacing face. You think this is a good choice? It's probably easy for you, right? Just die so that all your pain will go away. So that you can be with them. Naruto punched Jun in the stomach. Cough. You're so naive, Jun. You want to let them live. So that they can kill more people. Is that what you want? Naruto let go of Jun and he fell. You are so pathetic, Jun. Did someone's death really hit you that hard? Yes. This is unbearable, Naruto. How can people do such cruel things? She didn't do anything to them. She was the kindest person. Jun screamed. In his scream, he poured out all the pain that he had accumulated during this day. Jun screamed for a long time. He said a lot to Naruto. He blamed him for what happened, and he blamed himself for being weak. Jun said a lot, expressed a lot. In the end, the child fell silent, breathing heavily. Have you had your say? Naruto said, and without waiting for Jun's answer, he continued. Now listen, you just said that I don't understand how you feel, but you're wrong. Naruto's voice was calm, but his eyes were burning. He stood next to Jun, looming over him. It seemed as if Naruto was trying to suppress him, to make him afraid. I have lost many more people dear to me. Some I did not see die. Others I witnessed. I killed one friend with my own hands. I felt more pain than you. But I coped. I was able to pull myself together. After all, people's lives depended on me. So what? I have no one else. Everyone who was dear to me died. I have no reason to live now. Yes, maybe you're right. You have no incentive to live, but death is not an option. Because if I die, you will die too. Because you didn't take revenge. What? Jun didn't understand what Naruto said at first, but after a moment he realized what the ghost was getting at. I won't tell you about the value of life. I stopped believing in it myself a long time ago, but I can only say one thing. Evil must be repaid in the same coin. You mean? Jun, what do you think the bandits will do in the future? Jun didn't know what to say. They will continue to plunder. They will kill. They will not stop. This is their life. Their path. They chose it themselves and they are guilty of it. Maybe Jose and Otoka are their first victims, or maybe they have already killed hundreds of people. And no one will take revenge on them for this, because you, instead of fighting, decided to surrender. It is shameful to die. Jun looked at Naruto. He stood confidently. His eyes were glowing. Jun saw and felt that Naruto believed what he was saying. He hadn't lied anywhere. Jun looked down and looked at his hands. Small, childish hands. Jun had never killed people. Only animals. Will he be able to carry out his revenge? Will he be able to become like those bandits? Will he be able to deprive a person of the most precious thing he has? Will Jun be able to take someone's life? The child did not know the answer to this, but suddenly a thought appeared in his head that was ingeniously simple. The child looked at Naruto. He remembered everything the spirit had told him. About what he had experienced. About the goals he longed to realize. Jun remembered that Naruto's greatest dream was to carry out his revenge. The revenge he himself called sacred. Jun thought, if he himself can't take revenge for his loved ones, then maybe someone who is obsessed with revenge can. Someone who only wants that. Jun remembered their first conversation. A conversation that happened several years ago, but which he could easily recall now. Jun, our world is terrible and cruel. I know it much better than you. So, after a while, you yourself will come to me, asking to take your body. This will not happen. It will be, Jun, it will be. I know it. That's why I'll wait. I have to wait. After all, as the wise men say, revenge is a dish that is usually served cold. Naruto. Jun began quietly. I don't want to live and I won't take revenge. You. Naruto seethed. Idiot. Because of you, we're both going to die. And those responsible for Jose's death never got their punishment. I understand that, Jun said, standing up and walking towards Naruto. That's why I want to make a contract with you. Weak. I don't want to kill. I don't want to become the same person as them, but I can't leave them unpunished. That's why I ask. Jun walked up to Naruto and looked him in the eyes. There was determination in the child's eyes. He had decided something for himself. Jun extended his open palm to Naruto. Take revenge for me. Kill them. I want them to suffer. Naruto chuckled in surprise, looking at the outstretched palm. And how do you order me to do this? Materialize and kill them. Take my body. I give it to you, but in return I ask only for revenge, and then do whatever you want. Oh, Naruto said, looking at Jun in surprise. You decided to do something like that. But I want to say, if I become the dominant soul in your body, then you will most likely die. My soul will simply absorb you. Aren't you afraid of that? Aha. Jun laughed. It feels like you're trying to talk me out of it. Do you really feel sorry for me? Tell the truth. I suspect you don't feel sorry at all. I think you said all this on purpose to push me to this decision. Am I right? Naruto didn't answer, looking at Jun with a searching gaze. And you, as always, surprise me. You know, if you want, you can take revenge on them yourself. No, Naruto, I've decided. This is what I want, period. Let's call it my gift to you. For the fact that I once survived, thanks to you, and was able to live a little while feeling cared for. I am grateful to you from the depths of my soul. Naruto let out a surprised breath. You know, if I were a little kinder, I would start crying right now. I know, but you're too callous for that. Unfortunately, yes, Naruto said, squeezing Jun's hand. I promise I'll get revenge. I believe that you can do it. The child said, smiling. A second later, Jun was lit up with a bright blue light. The light was so bright that his eyes began to hurt. Naruto covered them. Jun became brighter and brighter. At some point, the child began to crack. A second later, he shattered into thousands of pieces. Along with the pieces, some energy appeared, which remained in the place where Jun stood. A second later, it slowly approached Naruto and was absorbed into him. Naruto opened his eyes. There was nothing around him. Jun was gone. Naruto was alone. He was now the full owner of the body. He was now Jun Fuko. You were such a nasty thing, Mori, Naruto said in Jun's body, removing his hand from Mori's head. You're still nasty. If you weren't dying right now, I would have made fun of you. You've done so much shit that. It's disgusting. Naruto released his other hand from around the man's neck, causing him to fall to the ground, blood quickly beginning to flow from his wound. Phew, Naruto exhaled, wiping the sweat from his forehead with a clean hand. Afterwards, he lowered his gaze and looked at his other hand. It was completely covered in Mori's blood. This hand also glowed with a light green light, which disappeared after a few seconds. Naruto moved his fingers with difficulty, after which he tried to brush the blood off his hand with a sharp movement, but it had already partially dried and he couldn't do it. Maintaining two techniques at the same time is so tedious, but I'm glad that my theory was confirmed. Chakra control does not depend on the body, it depends on the mind and soul. This makes my life easier. Suddenly, a sharp pain pierced Naruto's head and he fell to the ground. Naruto said, wincing. If I had known that the technique would hit like that, I wouldn't have used it. Although it's logical, I've never used it before. Although it most likely played a role in this, that I've been using it for quite a long time. I hope that with experience this won't happen. It's faster to get information directly from the enemy's mind than to use torture. Naruto sat on the ground, holding his head, waiting for the pain to completely subside. His head hurt for several minutes. During this time, Naruto watched Mori, who was at this moment on his last breath. A lot of blood flowed from the wound on his neck. He wouldn't survive, but Naruto didn't care. Too bad you're going to die so easily. You were a bastard, a misogynist, a molester, a murderer. The scum of society. Naruto spat out the last words. Watching Mori's last moments, Naruto thought about what he should do. He didn't have a clear plan yet, but the child understood that he needed to hide the body or make it so that the friends of this killer decided that he died due to stupidity or an accident. Not a single idea came to Naruto's mind. A wolf howl was heard in the distance. Naruto turned his head towards the sound and thought for a moment. He remembered that wolves rarely came to this area, but something must have happened that caused the pack to immigrate. Naruto had an idea of how he could use these wolves. Ooh, lucky, Naruto said cheerfully, getting up from the ground, but not before wiping his bloody hand on the grass. Your dead body, Mori, awaits a suitable afterlife for you. In the stomach of a wolf. Naruto turned towards the wolf's howl and stopped abruptly. He saw the bodies of Jose and Odoka. Naruto weighed the pros and cons and after a moment, he walked to the edge of the pit and, carefully taking the woman's body, lowered her into it. He did the same with the man's body. After that, Naruto carefully examined the area and, finding the shovel that Mori had used to dig this hole some time ago, began to fill it in. It's better to remove the bodies right away. and give them a chance to rest in peace, and pretend that Mori managed to complete the task. Yeah, it would be very strange if his friends found his dead body, and Otoka was lying next to it. Even a stupid person would think that something was wrong. Although it's dangerous to waste precious time on this. Suddenly someone will come. To hell with it, I'll believe in my luck. A few minutes later, Naruto finished filling the hole and, after first removing traces of his activities, went deeper into the forest. Well then, I hope the wolves are hungry, otherwise I'll have to find another way to explain to the bandits the reason for Mori's death. Hey, Pin, where's Mori? Said a toy, the leader of the sickle and axe gang, looking at his assistant with an angry look. Where the hell is he? I don't know, boss. Pin swallowed. I already sent Bor and Oak after him. Why so long? Atu hit the table with his fist. He in turn trembled, as if from fear. Sorry, boss, Ping said, falling to the floor and hanging his head. He was shaking. It had been a long time since he had seen his boss so furious. He was supposed to be on guard. But he's not there. Do you want to tell me something, Pin? Atu almost growled, looking with his murderous gaze. His scarlet eyes were burning with anger. Sorry, boss, I sent him with that woman. I ordered you. Having said this, Atu suddenly stood up from the table. The chair fell to the floor with a loud sound, but the boss did not notice. You should have done this, Pin. You dared to disobey me. Have you lost all fear, you bastard? Please, have mercy. Pin almost cried when Atu approached him. I was just. Atu pressed down on Pin's head with all his might, causing him to hit the floor. You pathetic lazy. When I tell you to do something, you must do it. Have you forgotten that? My orders are not to be discussed, Pin. They should be like the orders of a military leader, no, like the orders of the daimyo himself. Atu shook his head. But you dared to disobey these orders. Atu slightly eased the pressure he was putting on Ping, then leaned down to his ear. The boss's long brown hair brushed Ping's neck, causing him to flinch and the hair on his head to stand on end. Atu said quietly. Do that again and I'll kill you. I'll smash you. I'll crush you like a bug. I understand, boss. This won't happen again, Pin said, stuttering. If that's the case, then go and bring Mori to me. Atu growled. I have something to talk to him about. Atu walked away from Pin and, picking up a chair, sat down at the table. On this table stood a bottle of sake. I couldn't find what the container for storing sake is called. Tell me if anyone knows, and 2 cups. Atu drummed on the table, while Pin sat on the floor and tried to catch his breath. Have you disobeyed me again? Atu began threateningly. Sorry, boss, said Pin, slowly backing away towards the door. Boss. A loud voice suddenly sounded and the door opened with a slam. There were 2 people standing in the doorway. They were both big hulks with faces that suggested they were not very smart. Both were wearing sleeveless t-shirts and loose, wide pants that reached just below their knees. They both stood in the doorway, afraid to go in. What happened? Why are you yelling? Asked Atu, taking a sip from his cup of sake. Here's the thing, boss, mumbled one of the thugs. Let me tell you, Oak. In short, boss. Hey, Bor, don't interrupt. Shut up, Bor, speak up. In short, boss. Bor's voice was strange. It seemed like he was speaking through his nose. In short, Mori that died. What? Atu choked. Like dead. Wolves, boss. What? Where did you die? Near the pit, boss. To hell, said Atu, jumping up from his seat and approaching the thugs. Take him to Mori. Deal, boss. A few minutes later. Well, boss, we found him here. Atu didn't answer. He was looking at the place where Mori's body lay. There were many animal paw prints all around. Wolves. Everything was covered in their tracks. And even Mori was gnawed. There was not a single place where there were no teeth marks. If Atu hadn't known Mori, he wouldn't have been able to tell that it was him. The body was completely mutilated. The boar. Atu began quietly, pointing at Mori's severed arm. Did you try to put it back together? Mori's body was torn into several pieces. It was obvious that the wolves were happily tearing it apart. The head, arm and legs were separated from the body, but this was not what surprised Ada. What surprised her was that someone was trying to screw these torn parts back. Well, yes, answered the boar, smiling. I thought he would get up. Atu covered his eyes with his hand. He couldn't look at this extraordinary, gifted person. Boar. This man was incredibly stupid. He could be called a child in an adult's body, if you didn't know that this child had already killed about 20 people. He chopped them in half with his axe. Idiot. Atu said these words in such a tone that it seemed he was about to kill Boar. Why did I take you into the gang? Because I chop well, asked the Boar, tilting his head to the side. Atu sighed, looking at the sky and silently shouted to himself. Kaya, boss, what are we going to do then? Asked one of the bandits in his nasty voice. Almost the entire gang gathered around Mori's body. Some looked at the body of the dead man with regret, while the other part looked with malice, which they tried to hide. Atu remembered such people. He wrote them off as expendable. Their gang doesn't need such people. They need to be united. They need people who will be ready to lay down their heads for each other. That's what Atu thought. First, we dig Mori's grave and bury him. Almost everyone nodded in agreement. Even some of the people who were happy about Mori's death. Secondly, let's go look for the wolf pack. It's better to eliminate the threat right away. What about the house? Someone asked. Atu looked at the man who had asked. This man was Kawai Sabanto. A vile sycophant who would do anything to gain Atu's favor. He was a burden to the gang. Weak, cowardly, envious. No one liked him, but Atu knew that this rat had many useful contacts, so he kept him close, although he did not trust him, so he ordered Mori to keep an eye on him. You, rat, and Shinparu will remain in the house. Okay, boss, said the young man with green hair. Who will be the main one? Asked Kawai, his small eyes sparkling. Atu looked at the rat. He did not understand how a person could desire such a small amount of power. Yes, Kawai, asking this question, wanted to know who would remain in charge of the house while the others were gone. Kawai's thirst for power surprised Atu. And this thirst for power made Atu worry. What could this rat do? Betray them to gain someone else's favor? Or get money? How much were their lives worth in Kawai's eyes? Atu did not know, so he decided to satisfy Kawai's thirst for power for now, although he had already decided that after he fulfilled his role, he would kill him. Atu looked at Shinpara, who nodded imperceptibly in response, giving his consent. Atu grinned. Shinparu understood him instantly. A good guy, smart, reasonable, considerate. At the same time, he was loyal and unambitious. He didn't crave much. Just a good meal, a good night's sleep, and that was it. Atu was ready to trust his life to him. Kawai is the eldest. Great choice, great boss, Kawai said with pleasure. People, let's take some food and go hunting, said Atu, simultaneously covering his face with his hand and laughing at Sabanto. Exactly. I agree. Fresh meat. A chorus of disparate voices answered him. Atu waved his hand to two skinny guys and they, without thinking, approached the buried grave. The guys had already taken one shovel that was lying not far from the hole, and, having found the second one, they were about to dig up the girl's burial, when they were suddenly called out. Hey, don't you dare desecrate. The boys turned towards the voice. A man dressed in a black kimono with a green belt stood with a fierce look. He raised his hands, palms facing the sky. Oh, Kami, save the souls of these sinners. He said, Chief, you can't do this. You can't desecrate graves. This is sacrilege. We are bandits, not sinners. I would argue with you. Someone said in a quiet voice. Quiet, Atu barked, looking over his guys. And, not finding the speaker with his eyes, said in a calm voice, Stick, Eater. Nickname of the two who didn't understand. Dig a new tomb. We must bury our comrade according to all the traditions. You, Saint, will you help arrange everything correctly? There are prayers in my mind so that souls can ascend in peace. The saint folded his palms. Say it normally. Of course I will help. My duty as a priest requires it of me. A priest who kills. Worthy. Shut up, Aranaku. After some time. Hey, Tokingu, didn't you close the door? Hey, I'm a crook, the 16-year-old boy said offendedly. His voice was very harsh on the ears. Hey, people, less aggression. The door just doesn't close properly. Everything's fine. Another robber passed by. He suddenly sped up and ran into the house. Those who made it in time got a hearty meal. Hiroyuki. They shouted after him. He's a master at diffusing a situation. Yeah, it's not for nothing that he was an actor. Not in vain. Brothers, until tomorrow, let's drink to the repose of Mori, and tomorrow we'll go hunting. Shouted Atu, who had lost his mood a little after they buried Mori. For the repose of the soul. The robbers entered the house. A few minutes later, cheerful voices and shouts began to come from the house. In this hubbub, one could discern wishes for Mori, for the rest of the gang, and much more. A few minutes later, the kitchen window opened slightly and a shadow slowly and stealthily came out. It quietly jumped to the ground and, turning around every second, went into the forest. Knife blades gleamed in the shadow's hands. At the very edge of the forest, before disappearing into the shadows of the trees, the shadow looked back one last time and, making sure that no one could hear it, quietly said, "Now Jun's luck for years to come is definitely wasted," he said and disappeared into the shadows. "I hope no one finds out that I hid in the kitchen cabinet."